Good evening, everybody. I will call to order the October 9th, 2024 Londonderry Planning Board meeting. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a couple people missing today.
We got
John, yeah, nobody wants to hang out with you. We've got John missing, Sean missing, and Ann missing, so I will nominate Mr. D to vote for Ann, and we have a quorum.
gives us 7 voting members, so
Yes,
whoever's recording the minutes.
I'm actually
they should
just
start with that to get
going
the
to
voting
address.
records.
I'm going to address Beth real quick. We had a little bit of a request from our minute taker, Beth. She's asked that moving forward, we do a roll call vote for her, just to make it a little easier when she's doing minutes. I guess it's getting a little confusing with the yeas and the nays, so she's requested that we do roll call. So Beth, we'll take care of that for you. All right, on to approval of minutes. I have 2 sets of minutes here, but we're going to work on just September 11th, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes from September 11th, 2024.
Chairman,
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
a second.
All in favor, please say aye by roll call. Giovanni?
Abstain.
Abstain? Mr. D?
Tony D, aye.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Art Rugg, aye.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason Knights, aye.
Jake Butler, aye. Thank you. There is nobody else here, so we have
6-0-1.
the record that Mr. Varani has abstained and nobody voted in the negative. All right. Town staff, regional impact determinations.
None this evening, Mr. Chair.
Fantastic. And I will continue on with our town staff here.
Did you want to talk about the October 2nd minutes, or we're just going to approve them at the next?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We are going to do the October 2nd minutes. We'll just do them in November. We'll hit
Perfect.
October 2nd and
And I
9th
saw that there
together.
were some suggested revisions from the Vice Chair,
Yeah,
which will, we can probably
Yes.
incorporate in advance
Yeah.
for your review.
perfect.
Yeah, because I always check, make sure it's gotten there, because
Absolutely.
those are the official ones.
Absolutely. So we will, we'll talk about those at our November meeting, and we'll work at approvals for the last week and this week in November. All right, on to discussions with town staff. I have a conceptual discussion on possible waivers, amendments, and/or compliance alternatives for village cottage-style projects at 36 Pillsbury Road, zoned AR1, Woodmont Commons PUD. Pillsbury Development Company, LLC is the owner, and Procopio Companies is the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just.
Yes,
for a
sir.
minute, there's a couple of extension requests, if we could just take care of those.
Sure, absolutely.
We don't lose sight of them, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your package, you should see an email from Eric Mitchell to Alicia this afternoon requesting an extension to the Pa'tori conditional approval for this evening's meeting. Indicates they had made most of the plan changes, set the boundary markers, addressed Stantec's comments, and prepared the SWIP. Final review by staff and addressing any other comments is left. As a reminder, the board had granted this extension request back at the August 14th meeting. And had indicated that was the end of the extension request, so.
Mike, you
I
don't
see
have a
Mr. Mitchell is here in the audience, if you have questions of him.
Is that the copy right there, Mike? I was
So
just
this
looking
is
for something to
this is
read.
the waste management request, and.
Is there a
the-
Pator one in there?
The Pa'tori one, I did not put in here because I thought Mr. Mitchell could present it. It did come in today, and, I think formally it came in today. And this was discussed at the last meeting, or at a prior meeting. And I went back and I looked at the minutes. I recall that there was a board consensus that this was not going to be extended again. It was January 11th, 2023, when this was conditionally approved.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell, you want to come up?
Thank you. My name is Eric Mitchell. My office prepared these plans for Tory Brothers Paving. We have been here, as you know, for many, many extension requests. And the last time we were here, which was 2 months ago, we had an extension until tonight's meeting. It was my understanding that there was one board member that said that they did not want to give another extension, but it was not my understanding that was the board's vote. I thought that was if we came back again, they wouldn't vote. But I'd like to say that we have made considerable progress on it. As John had mentioned, we have done most of the plan changes that have all been done. We set the missing boundary markers. We've addressed Stantec's comments and prepared the stormwater pollution prevention plan. The final review by staff and any other comments need to be done. Like one of the comments that was not addressed is the Mylar has to be signed by the applicant. But we believe that we have the comments that were done. I understand that this has taken a very long time, and it just hasn't, for many months, things weren't moving along. But I think we're getting ready to do this. This business is a seasonal business. When the Patori bought the property, there were existing pavement that was in the wetland buffers, and they were required, based on this plan, to take pavement out of the wetland buffers and put in a stormwater detention plan to treat the water coming from the pavement. This plan, the project where we've done it, is not for increasing the site, the amount of units or the amount of usage of the site. It's what it is. So when they bought it, it was not in compliance with the wetland setbacks. So what we've shown and proposed cuts the pavement out of the wetland setbacks, puts a detention pond in, which saves a lot of the, protects the wetlands quite a bit. And that's really where we are. They do want to get it finished. And I'd ask the board to give consideration for a final extension to allow us to get back and forth with staff, just to make sure we're okay with it. I don't think that anything that is needing to be done out there is the weather or anything is causing a problem. If we get the plan approved, chances are that the work, some may be done this fall, but most of it would be done in the spring, like the detention pond, grading and seeding that, and also the areas. Maybe some of the pavement can be cut up and taken out. But I think this is more of an improvement to an existing non-conforming site than it is an expansion of an existing site.
Mr. Chair.
I'd like to give consideration.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chair, I was the one that made that suggestion. Basically, I believe I said enough is enough. It was a consensus vote.
Mm-hmm.
However, if staff, John, can convince me, that we are closer than we are farther away, I will certainly yield, just to try and get the project done. I think it's way overdue, but we're not gonna play that fiddle today. But I would like to hear from John to see where we are, how close we are, how far away we are, and then we can make a further decision.
Mr. Trotter?
Tony, I haven't seen the hard copies of what Eric has indicated that is complete. They were attached to the email. I don't sit there and print out everything. I have not had an opportunity to look at it
We're saying those came in last night?
this afternoon.
Or this afternoon? Is there a reason, Eric, why, I'm sorry, is that all right if I,
No, you're fine. Go right ahead, Mr.
is
D.
there a reason why they came in today for tonight's meeting?
Well, I was planning to do it yesterday. I had called to see who to submit them to. The planning staff, I didn't get an answer back, so they came in today. The plan changes are things that we've already made, but we were submitting them with the conditions of approval, their notice of decision, and comments on what we've addressed, and also the SWIP plans, which is new that we had submitted. We think that we're, I don't know what the percentage is, 80, 90%, 95% there. We just need review by the town staff and confirmation that the plan changes that were asked for were done, which I do believe that most of all of them were done. And we do want to get this put aside and be done with it.
Mike, could you refresh me on what the original date of conditional approval was? Did you say January of '23?
Correct. January 11th of 2023.
So we're 18, 19 months. I mean, I'd like to get it done. I would like to have them get it done, but whatever the board is happy with, I'm fine.
Mr. Rugg?
This is probably one of the longer ones. We've had some long ones also. And it seems like they inch closer, but my question to John is, do you feel that it's closer to being done than not being done?
It's been such a long time, Art, that I've looked at this. I'd have to refresh my memory what the conditions are and go through, refresh my memory what the conditions were, pull the previous plans, look at how it was addressed.
Yeah, I know from what, Eric said and what was in the, I think Mike had said, you got an email, what Eric has said, it sounds like things are just about done. That's my feeling. I don't have the data in front of me, but.
Neither
you
do
know,
I.
My feeling tends to be that way, and I would give him the benefit of the doubt.
Jeff, I think you looked like you had a comment real quick.
Yeah, I just have a really quick comment. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we have deadlines. This is one of the reasons we have published dates. It's one of the reasons why, we, as a town, really try to make build good relationships between developers and engineers and town staff. So I think it's really important to kind of like respect our town staff's time. Honestly, they're, receiving the information the day of, the day before, not knowing who to send it to, those types of things really kind of like, they pique my interest a little bit. That said though, the reality is the town reviews it, but it also has to get to the board to review. So we wouldn't have even had an opportunity to kind of see that. This has been a long journey, and really very much, I feel, in my heart of hearts that we're closer, but I just think it's important to say that you gotta respect our staff's time, you gotta respect our board's time.
Yep. And I'm sorry, Jason, real quick, I know you had your hand up.
I'm, just to let you know, I'm gonna vote against an extension, and I just wanna explain why. It's been 18 months, and John has been working here for 18 months, so the idea that we don't know who to send this to, and, it was 18 months to get the thing in before today, and I think that it's, as Jeff eloquently put, or as Tony put last time, enough is enough. In fact, I would personally like to see there be some kind of a limit on extensions so that we're not going through this with another, people come in front of us every month and we give them approval and they have to abide by a reasonable time frame. So from my perspective, you may be 90% done, but it took 18 months to get to the 90%, and that's assuming that John agrees that we're 90% done. So I will be voting against this.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
So what happens if we vote against maybe John, does he have to restart the whole process?
He would end up,
Can he use
reapplying
the existing engineering
Oh,
he
yes,
has?
oh, yeah.
He can, but that raises a good point, which is that the reason we have the 120-day deadline is because there's statutory vesting
Yeah.
once he has a conditionally approved site plan.
I would assume there could be some real site plan changes that theoretically he's no longer in compliance with, but he has a conditionally approved site plan right now,
Correct.
right?
So that's why that deadline exists, so that
Yeah.
these things can't carry on indefinitely.
And so it protects the applicant as well.
Yeah.
Because I know one of them is gonna be, again, the access to the pond.
So,
Well, I'm not done.
yes, sir.
I think that I realize he's going beyond his traditionally what we allow for extensions, but we still are trying to be a business-friendly community. And things get in the way, and there's been a lot of work done on this plan. There's a lot of time and money's invested in this plan. And I don't think substantially the site plan is gonna change much from when he originally got approved to today. You're just actually making more work for the applicant and probably the staff too, to go through this whole process. So how does it hurt to give them another extension and get this project brought forward? And I'm sure Mr. Mitchell will agree that if we give him another extension, he'll get it done in that timeframe. I would vote for, I am going to vote for the extension.
I think that, Eric, you looked like you raised your hand. Give me 1 second. I think everybody has valid points here. I think it just, for me, this has become almost a broken record at this point of, oh, they're almost there. They almost have everything done. We're almost going to have it in. We're going to have it for the next meeting. And, I think it gets to a point that, again, there's a reason why, what is it, 120 days for a conditional approval? There's a reason why we put 120 days on it. We're at 300, 600, 700, 800 days. If in my Londonderry High School math, we're over 700 days, no?
Is work okay?
No.
I'm
So,
as bad at math as you are, right?
Yeah. I think we're at a, personally, I think we're at a point now where is it just, I hate it, but, I mean, come on,
So I think we can hang our hat on the statutorial issue easier to, if it was very casually mentioned about a statute that was just changed in Londonderry by the town council about the circumferential, whatever, the way to get into a pond or whatever. That plan probably doesn't have that. What I would like this to continue, okay? But I want that whole plan looked at again. I want to see what else is there in the days that we're so far over. What else has changed? That's just one thing that's an obvious thing that the town changed. But what did the state change that may have looked at? Let's pick on drainage, because that always seems to be the thing. Maybe the state has changed some drainage calculations since then. I think the whole thing needs to be opened up again to look at. It's been almost 2 years. But I don't want to deny it either, but how, is there a mechanism, is there anything we can do to get that looked at, the whole thing looked at again, other than saying to the applicant, no, you gotta start over? Am I making any sense, or is that just bad
You are,
word?
you are, but again, I don't think statutorily, how can you do that,
Right. I mean, that's right. We have
Well,
an-
You hear it
I'm
all the
sorry,
time,
but
Tony.
Just to meet the objective.
Tony, you hear it all the time. Where did that comment come from?
Right,
Right?
yeah,
Where did it come from? Well, it's a new regulation.
yeah.
Well, what are you guys doing?
Right.
You look
so-
at me like I have two heads.
So if we think about why the 100, whatever days it is, was put in, what was the reason for
The
that?
intent behind
What was the
120
intent? Thank
days.
you. What was
Yeah.
the intent? Spirit of the law, letter of the law, what was the intent of that? The intent was to make sure that the applicant in that plan was in compliance with all the current rules, regulations, or whatever.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is, is there a workaround to get to that outcome?
I don't believe so. I mean, where it is today, he has a conditionally approved plan. We know what the conditions are that the board attached to it. I think that the options are to grant the extension or not grant the extension at this point. I don't think you can add additional conditions at this point in time.
By denying the extension,
I'll give you, hold on 1 second. I just want
by denying the extension, it gives us an opportunity to look at it all again.
Eric.
Because he has to start over.
Yes, I'd just like to say that what has happened in very much a negative way has not been meant to show disrespect to the board or to staff. Today, submitting stuff today and the things were submitted, we did not expect those to be looked at before tonight's meeting. We just wanted to show you that there was information that has been done, not just a letter saying, please give us 2 more months. and we wanted to show that we were there, and we've, got the other studies and other things that were done. In terms of the changes to the plan that, maybe some other changes that, I think that may be correct, that if it gets continued, that it's the same conditions that were from before. But I will say that we are willing to talk to John and work with John about the changes. I'm not aware of what the changes are, but he just mentioned some on the detention pond. So we can look at that to see if we can incorporate that into the design that we already have. And the main reason why we're looking for an extension is that we know it does take time for staff to review the plans and send them out and come back. And it's not just something that can be done, in a week or two. It's something that sometime may take a month or two, but that's what we want to do.
When was the last extension request granted? Was it September?
It
Or
was
was it
August
August?
14th.
August, I think.
August 14th?
Yes.
So what has happened between August 14th and October 9th that you're saying just October 9th you're submitting them information? What has happened between those 2 months and, when we were in August, it was, this will be completed, so we do not have to come here for an extension request. What happened inside of those, in 2 months, has staff received any?
Staff has not received it until today, because we knew that the deadline was coming up and staff would not have time to review it. We just inserted some of that into our email to show that the stormwater pollution prevention plan was done, a letter of the notice of decision addressing the things that needed to be done, addressing also Stantec's comments that they had. And so the plans themselves, including the staff comments and Stantec's comments, I believe have mostly all been addressed, and that's what is on the plans. But I wasn't going to send a set of plans because I knew that they couldn't look at them today, and I wasn't expecting them to. But we are, from a progress standpoint, the conditions of approval have primarily all been met. Like I said, there may be a few other little things that, have to be done. So it wasn't, what I submitted is to show you that there is work that has been done, and it's significant work that's been done on this to try to get it all done and wrapped up.
Mr. Chair,
Board, I'm looking for a,
Mr. Chair, just a couple of comments. With all due respect, when we say that there still may be a few things open, that we're not sure if everything has been addressed, that's kind of a red flag to me. But I'm going back to the minutes from our August 14th meeting, and the comment was made there that the board agreed that after over a year of extensions, they will not grant another extension request after this one. So I think the applicant was very well aware of our position at that point in time.
so I am looking for a motion, folks.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to deny the applicant's continuance request.
I have a motion to deny the applicant's continuance request. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a second from Mr. Wiles. All in favor of denying the extension request? I gotta get used to this whole roll call thing. If I could start from my right and go to my left with a roll call vote, please.
Giovanni Verani, nay.
Tony DeFrancesco, yay.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Arthur Rugg, nay.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason Knights, aye.
Jake Butler, aye. Your motion to extend this has been denied.
Vote is 5-2-0.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if we can take care of one other extension request, in your packet, I believe there's an email from Amy Johnson.
Waste management?
Yes, on behalf of Waste Management. Again, what Fuss and O'Neill, in her email, she didn't actually give a specific timeframe, but I did speak with Amy this afternoon, and they're asking for an extension from November 7th to February 6th, 2025. So in essence, it's a 3-month extension.
Give me 1 second here. Just gotta get it to open up in Word.
Mr. Chair, just for your information, it looks like the notice of decision issued the July 10th is when this was conditionally approved.
Correct.
Of this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Board, do we have any input here?
I think this is the first time for them.
This is a first, yes.
This is-
Requested the
Correct.
extension, so, and what's the date they want it?
To February sixth, 2025, Art. So in essence, it's 30
Okay.
days, or excuse me, 3 months.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Just a quick comment. Are they aware of kind of the timeline, any timelines or any dates that they need to provide information to the town? Just
In terms of,
in terms of just meeting the date, the continuance date.
yeah, again, so, as far as they're concerned, again, they do feel that they could get the work done within that 3-month timeframe, Jeff.
The conditions.
And that
Correct.
includes getting the information to staff to review, and then, there's ample time to
Correct.
review, not a.
Yeah, they're getting close.
Okay,
They're very close.
thank you.
Mr. Rugg?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we grant Waste Management an extension to their amended site plan to the 6th of February of 2025.
I have a motion from Mr. Rugg. Do I have a second?
No, second.
I have a second from Mr. Wiles. Roll call vote. I'll start with Giovanni.
Giovanni Veroni, yea.
Tony DeFrancesco, yay.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Arthur Rugg, aye.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason Knight's here.
And Jake Butler, aye. This extension request has been granted to February
6th.
6th, 2025.
And that vote was 7-0-0.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So when something like this gets extended like this, does the applicant get a notification saying, we expect the plans to be in 10 days before
The deadline
planning
date.
board meeting, or 7 days before the meeting? Is there-
Not as specific as that, Tony.
I think that could be,
They know that they have, and they have till February sixth, 2025 to get that plan signed.
That's the date of the meeting, right? February 6th?
I think it's the 5th. It ends up being the 5th, so.
So,
Right, because recall that this is, once conditional approval is granted, this process is taking place at the staff level.
yeah, no
right,
longer.
but because it's extended, does our templates or our system show them, okay, if the board meeting is on the 5th, I need to get it to staff by January 20th, so that they have a chance to look at it before the board meeting?
We don't spoon feed them like that, Tony, for the reason being, in 2 weeks, they might have everything ready. They submit it, okay, we're done. You follow me? Because I don't want to push
I
them
do.
out either.
Yeah, no,
'Cause then
I
some of
get-
them will look at it and say, well, I get till January. It's like, no, if it's ready, go.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm trying to, I don't know.
You're
I
trying to
don't-
find a,
It's probably
you
come up
know,
with a
it's 10 days
system.
before the meeting, this still isn't in. Don't forget that town staff has to review this to even consider that, yes, you've met your conditions.
But that's work, someone's gonna have to track it. Who the hell's gonna do that? I mean, but yeah.
Unless
but-
there's
They have
a
a
program or
responsibility.
something to track this
They
stuff.
have responsibility,
Very
but
responsible.
Yeah, I mean, I echo John's sentiments on this. I think that these are people who are being paid a lot of money, by and large, to move these projects through. I don't think it's on us to chase them. and-
how's that been working so far?
This is the first discussion I recall on plan extensions. We never had the.
Listen, like, as we've discussed before, if somebody calls us and says, hey, how much time, John, do you need to review this before the
I need
the
a
next-"
week.
We would tell them. We would engage. I mean, ideally, there is an interactive, cooperative process, because our duty to cooperate with applicants and assist applicants does not end when the conditional approval issues. So, most of the time, I think, these things fall into one of two categories. Either people who are diligent and they know what they're doing and they're moving them forward, or, people who are not, maybe doing that.
Diligent.
Yes.
So our current system works until it doesn't.
It's,
It's like any system.
being a system that's run by people, that's right.
I get it. I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think outside the box, that's all.
It seems like that's more the exception rather than the rule.
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, and Eric is very good and diligent, and, I think it's unfortunate when they have a difficult,
Yeah,
applicant to deal with.
but to Jeff's point, it usually is exactly the opposite concern, because once the conditional approval issues, people are in a
On
mad
top of
rush
it.
to get their
Yeah.
project started, typically.
Yep.
And if they don't take our guidance, there's nothing we can do, Tony,
I understand. Thank you.
believe me.
Thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair, if one more
Yes,
though,
sir.
too, just to act on it now regarding old business, there's an extension request.
Is this a continuance?
Or, excuse me, under old business.
Yep.
If you could act on that, because I see there's a lot of people in the audience waiting for that one.
Okay.
So, and that's for, I'm being facetious.
Yeah, and just to, thank you, John. So this is,
Let the record reflect that John Trotter just said a joke.
he just made a joke. Doesn't happen too often. This one, so the next planning board meeting will be the last opportunity for the planning board to either approve or deny this plan.
Inside of our 65-day time.
Correct. It has been continued. This will be the fourth continuous.
Okay. All right, so this is for the 39 Rockingham Road, correct?
Correct.
In the record, Mr. Chair, and I'll make a motion.
Yeah, so I am looking for a motion to request a continuance for 39 Rockingham Road, Londonderry, New Hampshire, tax map 13, lot 65-1, which is the AK Investments LLC with Jones and Beach as the engineers, to be continued to the November 6th, 2024 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that the plan that you had just mentioned be continued to the 6th of November, 2024, at the request of the applicant.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a second. All in favor? Oh, jeez. Roll call. Mr. Varani. It's gonna take a minute to get used to, guys. I'm sorry.
It takes a while.
Giovanni Verani, aye.
Tony DeFrancesco, aye.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Arthur Rugg, aye.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason Knights, aye.
And Jake Butler. Aye. This has been continued to the November 6th, 2024 meeting. All right. Mr. Trotter,
Yep.
you got anything else good for me?
No, I'm all set, Jake.
Fantastic. So now, I take it, we will work on the conceptual discussion I was talking about.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
You're already primed, Mr. Chair.
Fantastic. So just to refresh everybody, this is a conceptual discussion on possible waivers, amendments, and/or compliance alternatives for the Village Cottage-style project at 36 Pillsbury Road, which is map 10, lot 42-0, zoned AR1, Woodmont Commons PUD. Pillsbury Development Company LLC is the owner. Procopio Companies is the applicant. All right, folks, come on up.
Where is that one?
It's the PowerPoint. That's the top PowerPoint.
Got it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Or I assume you'll give him a little background and just a refresher. When Procopio had come in a couple of months ago now, Laura, I believe it was, just to discuss with the board again what they had envisioned for the area called WC8, which is, in essence, is north of Pillsbury Road, correct. So again, it was pretty unique, what they were showing. And again, if you recall, the Woodmont PUD does not envision that type of development north of Pillsbury Road. If you recall, again, it was, and I believe Laura has something in her slides, was more of the cookie cutter lots. And if you remember, again, so there's a change to the PUD. So I think that's what, basically what the discussion is for this evening. Yep.
Mike, did you want to talk anymore?
I'm sorry, what was
get in
the, was there
Well, again, I
a?
Just
sound is-
before we get started, Mike was kind of setting the stage. Mike, my goodness, John
my
was setting.
brother, Mike.
Sorry, John. John was setting the stage as to what we've got in front of us. A little bit on what came before us, I believe, last month.
Yep.
And how we've gotten here. So, is there anything you want to touch on before we let?
Yeah, and thank you, Laura, for the opportunity. I think that we had a very productive meeting at the staff applicant level. This is a lot, there was an article, actually, this is timely, because there was an article in the Union Leader about comparing Woodmont to Tuscan and some of the other large mixed-use PUDs, and the theme was the need for flexibility because these projects develop over the course of decades, and things that, are in vogue at one point in time are not necessarily in vogue later. And as a prime example of that, one of the phenomenon that we have seen is the collapse of office development and use, and in favor really of housing. I think that our master plan anticipated a lot of what has happened, including mixed-use zoning, and I think that it has aged fairly well. This is an area where the master plan, in general, seems to me flexible enough to embrace something like the proposal that we've heard about and that we're going to hear more about tonight. It's a little unclear at times exactly how to navigate that process, and so I expect that you'll hear about compliance alternatives. I expect that you'll hear about other ways to do this. But I think that the key takeaway, I spent some time looking at these slides this afternoon and researching this actually before I got the slides. And I think by and large, I've come to the same conclusions that Attorney Gandia has come to. I think that I'm interested in hearing her analysis. I think that I would encourage the board not to, when we're looking at how to accommodate a project like this, I would encourage the board not to get too far down in the weeds, because I think that the master plan is very clear about the intent of a specific land use area, and these compliance alternatives can be granted as long as the development is meeting that intent at least as well as what is set forth in terms of the plan. And I think that from a very high level, by and large, you can do a lot of that analysis just looking at their slide about what this project would look like with single-family lots on it. It's very intensely developed. It does not feel and look like an apple orchard or an open meadow. And next to it is the plan that they presented the last time, which does not have the same feel, the same intensity, and preserves a lot of the character. And so that is the frame that I would encourage the board to apply to this as you listen to this presentation tonight.
Sure. Fantastic. The floor is up.
Just want to note, I think in the Union Leader, there was a good article on flexibility, and the Woodmont PUD was talked about in that also.
Correct.
And I think that was a lot of putting it together was, we didn't know, so that's why there's a flexibility. And also times change, so we could have a plan that can last a while through time, and really, I think it's done well over the 10 years. So.
Absolutely.
I agree.
So we'll be all ears. So.
All right, folks, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, members of the planning board. My name is Laura Gandia. I'm an attorney at Divine, Millimet, and Branch in Manchester. Just wanted to introduce our team. We have Kevin Smith here today as for Pillsbury Realty, the developer. We have Will Nocchio. He's the project manager from Procopio. We have Dave from VHB, who I believe is a familiar face to you all. And I feel bad saying this, but I do want to kind of just go through a learning exercise with the board about the PUD, because there's so much in this document. I think in order for us to move forward, we have to set a basic foundation or framework of what the PUD is, how it was set up, how the regulations interplay. So if you just bear with me as we go through this, I think it will be really helpful for the board, and actually will make it easier for us to move forward. So you do have the slides from the slideshow that's in front. So I just wanted to start off talking about the intent, and that is slide number 1, and the goals of the PUD. And there are many of them, but the one I wanted to bring to your attention is that the PUD was developed to create regulations and establish a process that allows flexibility in phasing and in the actual development plan. I know that's been mentioned, I just wanted to point that out, that that does exist in the PUD master plan. And the next slide is section 1.4.1, documents and relationships. That's on pages 37 and 38 of the PUD master plan. So the PUD master plan developed a unique relationship between the PUD and the town's land use regulations, which consist of the site plan regulations, the subdivision, and the zoning ordinance. The PUD was established under the provisions of the zoning ordinance of 2012 and actually holds fast to those regulations that were existing in 2012. So for the Londonderry zoning ordinance, the PUD allowed for changes to the zoning as part of the master plan. And the PUD also provided that existing typical zoning standards may still apply for future projects if those standards have not been waived in the approved PUD master plan. In such instances, the Londonderry zoning ordinance provision in effect on the date of the completed Woodmont Commons PUD master plan, October 3rd, 2012, will be applicable. So again, I think that's important for the board just to know going forward that the current site plan and subdivision regulations do not govern the PUD. You have to go back to those that were in existence in 2012. And that's also spelled out in section 2.14, the applicability section, and it talks about the PUD took the zoning ordinance, it waived some provisions of the zoning ordinance, and then it also provided modifications to different provisions of the zoning ordinance. So that's the unique relationship that it has with the town's zoning ordinance. The next set of land use regulations for the town is the subdivision regulations, and that's on the next slide. And again, the same principle, the PUD allowed for changes to the subdivision regulations, and it says, alternative subdivision regulations can be established within a PUD master plan that includes waivers of portions of the corresponding Londonderry subdivision regulations. And the PUD, again, went through and it tweaked some of the standards that were existing at the time for the subdivision. It contains a list of waivers in the PUD to the subdivision regulations, as well as some modifications to those subdivision regulations. And for the subdivision, it's a similar idea. If an existing provision of the Londonderry subdivision regulation is not waived in the PUD master plan, then future proposals will need to comply with the applicable provisions in effect on the date, which again is that 2012. And again, the PUD has another great table on section 2.14, which is page 52, that has waivers and modifications to the subdivision regulations. And the last land use document that the PUD references is the Londonderry site plan regulations. And again, very similar idea. The PUD allowed for changes to the site plan regulations. A number of alternative regulations governing future PUD site plans within the Woodmont Commons contained in the PUD master plan. There's a specific list of site plan waivers contained in section 2.1. And again, if the existing provisions of the Londonderry site plan regulations is not waived by the PUD, then future proposals have to comply with the Londonderry site plan regulations in effect in 2012. And again, you have that nice table on section 2.14 that goes through the different waivers and modifications. So that's the basic gist of how the PUD master plan was set up to work, taking the land use regulations that are in existence in 2012, tweaking some of those in the PUD, allowing for that flexibility, whether it's a waiver or modification, and then saying you still may have to fall back on the existing 2012 land use regulations for future proposals. So the next question that we were thinking of when we were doing our research is, what if they have not been waived or modified, then they apply? And that's exactly what, when we were doing our analysis, we came to say, if they're not waived or modified, meaning those land use regulations, then they are going to apply. And that's what it says on the slide. That is 2.11. And these PUD regulations and standards replace or augment all of the town's regulations and standards that have been waived. If the existing town regulations and standards, subject to planning board approval as of October 3rd, 2012, have not been waived, they will apply as criteria. So that's the gist of how the PUD is meant to work. So we took a look at maybe we can have our project move forward with a waiver, a modification, or something like that. Can we go down one of those paths to effectuate the overall design intent of this project? And we said, unfortunately, no. So that meant, well, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? And of course, we go back to the 600-page PUD master plan, and we found some options. I found 3 options that we can look at to determine how we can move forward with this plan. And you should have that slides up. So the 3 options that we found were a compliance alternative, a minor modification or amendment, or a proposed amendment. So those were the 3 additional avenues that we found that were available to us to move the project forward. So we looked at the compliance alternative. And we actually determined that the compliance alternative is the mechanism that we believe best fits our design intent and the intent of the PUD master plan. So what is a compliance alternative? Well, the PUD is great again, and it defines what a compliance alternative is. It gives the criteria, and it also gives a description. It says, in some cases, the underlying public purposes may be accomplished as well or better through alternative design and development that approaches that have not been envisioned within the range of the PUD regulations and standards within this document. So again, that's that flexibility component. The PUD recognizes that there may be things that they wasn't thought of back in 2012, and there may be better ways, even if it was thought of, a different way or a more appropriate way to move projects along. So it says, as a result, applicable portions of the PUD regulations and standards may be implemented through compliance alternatives that are agreed to by both the planning board and the project proponents. In such cases, the planning board shall use the following planning and design principles as criteria for determining the compliance alternative achieves the underlying public purposes for any specific regulation or standard. And the PUD does talk about those criteria, and we'll get to those in a minute. And those criteria are similar to what the board's used to looking at for a waiver. When people come to the board for a waiver, in your regulations you have waivers. For compliance alternatives, you have criteria. And on the next page for 2.21, it gives a little bit more description as to what a compliance alternative is and how it can be approved. It states that the planning board and the applicant may mutually agree to an alternative method or standard that meets section 2.13 planning and design principles to the same degree or better. This may be accomplished without amending the master plan if the applicant documents and the planning board approves a compliance alternative. So again, we can have an alternative method or a standard that allows us to move forward, provided it can meet the planning and design principles to the same degree or better. And then it says a compliance alternative must accomplish the relevant planning and design principles. Documentation must indicate the specific proposed alternative method or standard that will be used, why the section 2.0 PUD regulations and standards are not applicable to the application, and how the project is fully compliant with the intent of the PUD master plan. Thank you, John. The planning board approval of a compliance alternative is discretionary, but shall not be unreasonably withheld if the applicant has provided sufficient documentation to justify such request. Then it goes on to say, all PUD regulations and standards are subject to these compliance alternatives except for the following. And the following is allowable uses, building heights, densities, and maximum use densities. So that's saying if you are trying to change one of those 1, 2, 3, 4 things, you can't go for it with a compliance alternative. We're not doing any of those, so we're not looking to change the allowable uses. We're not looking to change building heights. We're not changing or increasing density, and we're not touching a maximum use density. So far in our analysis, we're good with a compliance alternative. And then the next page are those criteria. And that's 2.1.3, review and approval of compliance alternatives. And the PUD gives you the planning and design criteria. If we were to move forward with a compliance alternative, we would have to demonstrate to the board that we can meet what's laid out in the PUD. And those 5 categories are aesthetically attractive features, connected walkable neighborhoods, quality site design, quality architectural design, and potential impacts and mitigation needs. So again, similar to the waiver criteria, these are the compliance alternative criteria. So we really believe compliance alternative is the method that we should use, but there are 2 other methods that we need to go through very quickly, just so the board is familiar with them, because ultimately it's my understanding that the board and town staff are going to make a decision as to what method they believe we can use to move the project along. So the next section, or one of the sections in the PUD, is section 2.5.2, modifications and amendments to the PUD master plan. And so the second option, we have the compliance alternative was the first. The second is a minor modification and amendment. And this says a minor modification or amendment shall mean any and all changes to the PUD master plan that does not, and then it gives you the 1 through 6. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I am going to point the board's attention to number 5, and that's alter the block types, size, and dimensions criteria stated in section 2.3.2 block types. We are looking to change that. So because we are looking to change that block type, we can't use the minor modification or amendment, because we are looking to do one of the things that it says, if you're doing this, you can't use this particular vehicle to move your project along. So in our opinion, this particular modification method is not applicable to our project. The final option that we found in the PUD master plan was the proposed amendment. And the proposed amendment, basically, and this, unfortunately, it's not that clear what a proposed amendment is. It says a proposed amendment that do not qualify as minor modifications and amendments, as the same are defined above, shall be considered in accordance with, and then it's a section of the zoning ordinance that does not tell you what a proposed amendment is. So specifically, the developer may apply to amend all or portion of an approved PUD following the same process applicable to the establishment of the PUD. We're not looking to amend the PUD at all. We're not looking to do any of that. And if you look at a proposed amendment in relation to the minor modification and amendment, it's basically, you could read it as it's very similar. The minor amendment doesn't apply, and we're not looking to amend it. We're just looking to alter the block type and provide with a different overall design scheme that, again, we believe falls within the compliance alternative criteria. So now you're going to say, well, what are you looking to do? And tell us more as to why it's a compliance alternative. So here we are. So you may remember we were here before you. We're looking at 36 Pillsbury Road, map 19, lot 42, 94 acres of a build-to-rent community of approximately 250 rental single-family units assembled into 8 clusters. And it consists of the Woodmont Common Area 1, 7, 8, 10, and 11. And I also have on here, on this slide, you can see what Procopio is going to buy in its entirety, which includes the W6 area as well. But that's not what we're here for. We're just looking at the W8 area, and that line going all the way down is where we're seeking the compliance alternative for. But just so you know, they are looking to buy that whole area there. So if we come back in front of you, we want to make sure that you knew that we had other things in mind as well. But we're just here right now for the compliance alternative for 36 Pillsbury Road. So again, we went through our analysis and we said, well, are we similar at all to any of the design criteria contained in the PUD? And there's a lot in the PUD. And we think we are. We think we fall a similar design concept to the cottage court design criteria. But we're also very different. We have, block lot types that are different, setbacks, sidewalks, green space landscaping, roadway design. Some may consider us to be a multifamily. So we started to delve into the cottage court. And the next slide that you see, I think Town Manager Malaguti pointed out, here's our sub area that we're looking at. Here's what the PUD vision was in the PUD master plan. And again, what you see here was just basically an illustration. Didn't say you have to do that, but this is one of the ideas that the PUD envisioned at that point in time. And even says it's an illustration. You need to go to a different section to look to see exactly what the design criterion guidelines are. And then you can see with the proposed sub area exactly what we're trying to do. So again, you have the 250 houses, you have the 6 clusters, you have more open space, you have walkability, and it's more community orientated. And the next slide is the site overview, just so you can see what the site looks like now. And then the next slide is what you can see, what we envision looking like when we complete the project. Again, it's those clusters. We're not doing what was one of the ideas of the PUD, where it looked much more intense. It's not, we have a lot more green space, we have a lot more areas that are conserved, the houses are clustered together. If the board remembers when we were here last time, it's more like the cottage court feel to it, where you have, green space in between some of the houses to really give it this sense of community and feel that the PUD master plan, we believe, was one of the design principles and guidelines in directing the overall development of the PUD master plan. So I wanted just to focus a little bit more on the cottage court, because I think that may come up when town staff and the board are looking at, well, why isn't it a cottage court? What's happening with the cottage court? So the cottage court has some performance standards, and the board, I believe, is familiar with performance standards. Your overlay district has performance standards in the zoning. So this is just a way to keep a project at a certain level. It looks well, performs well. So the performance standards for the cottage court are spelled out in the PUD master plan. In the first thing it talks about is the minimum lot sizes shall be waived, and we won't have any minimum lot sizes. If the board remembers, we're keeping that one lot, just one big lot, and we're just putting all the houses on there to be rented. So we're not taking, I'm not saying to you, I want, instead of a quarter acre lot, I want, a smaller lot. I'm not saying that, so I'm not asking you to waive the minimum lot sizes for each of the houses, because there's going to be no lot size for the houses, because they're all going to be on one master lot. So that's not contained anywhere in the PUD to take, in this particular areas, the sub areas, to take one lot and put the 250 houses in. So that gets problematic with the cottage court. The overall design feel is very similar, but when you get into the performance standards, now we kind of hit a brick wall almost. And some of the other things that, we believe that we won't be able to meet, each individual single-family cottage court may contain 4 to 16 cottage units in lots around a common open space. As you can see, we have 250 homes. We have A through F for the clusters. We're going to far exceed the 14 to 16 cottage units. We believe we'll have difficulty with the open space for the 250 square feet because we're, reconfiguring the units differently. So when we just got to the performance standards for the cottage court, we felt that we're not meeting these. We're not meeting the design intent for the cottage court, although it's very similar and the look and feel of it is very similar to what we're trying to do. It just, in our opinion, wasn't working for the PUD master plan and its requirements. And the next page talks about cottage courts, residential lots. And this is where you really get into the nitty-gritty, the fun stuff of the PUD master plan. It says that you can have cottage courts with a building type of single-family detached. So it shows the building type, single-family detached. You can have cottage courts for that. But now you're going to say, well, what's a building type? And this is where, again, we felt we need relief from the board because the house has to have is a building type, and then it's going to have a lot type, which is going to be the next page, a block type, a building, and lot type. So single family is the building type. We're okay with that to a certain extent, but then when you get to the next page, it talks about a block type and a building and lot type. And this is where it gets very detailed and really into the nitty-gritty. So the block types are one thing. So that's the block. Like, what are you doing on that particular piece of land, the overall block? And they say, the PUD says, well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 block types that you need to fit into for your project. And it could be a village center, neighborhood, flex, perimeter. I review those. We don't fit into any of the block types. So there's another brick wall that we've came to. Okay, so we don't do that. Well, what about the building and the lot type? So each building type has a lot type, and the lot type has standards for lot frontage, lot depth, lot area. But we don't have a lot because, again, we have one lot, which throws you back to the block type, that we're not able to meet. So you have the block type we don't meet. And even if you said we did meet, then we're going to have to look at the building type, which, okay, you could say we're single family detached, but then you need to go to the lot type. And the lot type has lot frontage, lot depth, lot area, and it's envisioning an actual lot for each of those buildings. We don't have that because, again, we're one lot with 250 residential units on that one lot. So I think I may have made your head spin enough. So at this point, just with those, the compliance alternative, the overall design concept of the 250 units, the block type, the building type, the lot type, we believe that the compliance alternative is in fact the best option for us to move forward because we can't fall under the minor amendment and we can't fall under the proposed amendment. In addition to that, I want to have Dave just weigh in on a couple of other things of how we're different and why these differences, again, lead us all to the compliance alternative option for us to move forward under. Dave?
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, as we get into sort of the intent of, some of the engineering pieces with roadway design and things like that, the intent, we want safe travel for vehicles, we want connectivity for bike and ped. We want to make sure the emergency vehicles can access all the sites. And what's in the PUD really reflects the uses and intensity of what's in the PUD. Whether that's on-street parking, the sidewalks on either side of the road, lighting, landscaping, this kind of like the streetscape type of feel. And what we'd like to do is just, work with John and the fire department and the police department and really hone our design in for something that's more suitable for the intensities that we're looking at, a lower density, sort of that rural feel that's more in line with sort of the surrounding areas. But again, keeping with that overall intent of making sure that we have safe roads and that we have accessibility for vehicles and things like that. So again, not looking to do anything that's outside of standard engineering practices, just looking to come up with, some design standards that are more suitable for something that really wasn't envisioned initially for the PUD.
So with that, I don't know if, I know that was a lot of information and a lot of detail. If the board had questions for me, if town staff had questions that I could answer. And my understanding is, the board and town staff will give us the direction after we had this discussion of where to go, and we were hoping to move forward quickly, if it's a compliance alternative, to have a public hearing, and I talked with the town staff about just not approving the project, just making sure that the board's okay with us having a compliance alternative, and they approve it, so then we can move forward with the project, because we're not going to have all the engineering work done if the board's like, you can't even, get past hurdle number one, which is the compliance alternative. So we envision having just a separate public hearing on the compliance alternative to see if the board would grant us approval. If they did, then we would move forward with all of our nitty-gritty engineering work through the design review process, the formal process, and go forward like that.
I will, before I come to the board, I'll defer to staff for a couple minutes and get some input if you have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I thank you to Attorney Gandia for the excellent presentation. I agree with almost everything that she said. I think they're to be applauded for not trying to put a square peg in a round hole. I think that I agree entirely that the cottage court initially looks like it might work, but it quickly falls apart. I think that's exactly right. I agree with the analysis about the minimum lot sizes not needing relief here. There's one lot. You don't need relief based on their concept. I think that I agree that the compliance alternative is probably the way to go for this. I think that my opinion has changed a little bit after hearing that presentation. I did note, and it's funny because you've kind of identified what I was struggling with, which was, the initial slide that talked about what you can't do with the compliance alternative, allowable use, changing the allowable uses, changing building heights, changing allowable densities for open space or use, and then the minimum use densities. Changes to block type are not on that list. And so therefore I was a little confused or I guess surprised to see, again, the provision that she cited, 2.5.2, that talks about what you can't do by way of minor amendment. And number 5 on that list is block types. And I guess the conclusion that I came to reading that earlier was that, well, if you can't do it by minor amendment, then that kicks you into the full amendment land. I think that the presentation that you heard is reasonable, though, understanding that this is all about the intent, complying at least as well with the intent of the land use plan and the other criteria that you've heard about. I do think that there is, I think that that's an ambiguity. And what do we do when we have an ambiguity? I think we try to identify the most reasonable reading, and I think that what you heard here is a reasonable reading. I also note that there's some interesting language in the PUD, and I think a lot of that interesting language would push you in favor of flexibility and reasonable interpretation and not putting people through a lot of process. One of those provisions, I think, is 2.1.3, which says that in some cases, interpretation of specific PUD regulations and standards may be required based on the unusual circumstances of a specific project proposal. In such cases, the planning and design principles can be employed by the planning board as a guidance document. So I do think that this was designed to have a lot of play in the joints. Nothing that Attorney Gandia said tonight I believe is unreasonable. I think that adopting the approach that you have been presented here tonight will result in a much less intensive project that benefits all of the residents of Londonderry. And so I would urge you to look favorably on it.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, again, I think Laura presented it pretty well, again, as far as the compliance alternative. Some things that are still kind of fuzzy in my mind, and again, I'm a guy that likes to see a chart that, where do they meet, what does that area allow, what is the deviation? So that way, again, it's black and white. And again, because as it's been said a number of times this evening, things are changing. So again, we just want to document it. The other thing that I'm kind of unclear on, though, too, again, so does this compliance alternative only apply to WC 8, or does it apply to 11, 6, and everywhere else? So again, it just, in my mind, it needs to be clearer. And again, I think, it's something that staff can work out and come up with, okay, so what is it? It's not WC 8 anymore, it's WC 8B, or whatever the heck it is. The couple of the other things that kind of caught my eye was the setbacks from the property lines, that being as close as 3 feet. So again, I know that there is no property lines out there anymore, but again, it's just, so what does that mean? Again, if they're presenting that it's gonna be as close as 3 feet, so, and there's no property lines, well, what do you got? The other issue that I would have, and again, as, it was said, again, emergency service access, we need to take a look at that. And again, make sure that the fire department is on board with that from day one. I think it's nothing that we need to, can't play around with that personally. Lastly, I think, again, this, in my mind, again, I still question, does the master developer need to agree to this change? I would assume so. Again, they need to, they were the creators of the PUD, so, I think that's all I had right now.
Thank you. Sylvia?
If you could go to slide 13, please. It's the map. Thank you. So if we take a look at this, what we see that when we're talking about the area, so we're talking about certainly the largest portion is WC-8. There's also, as Laura's mentioned, WC-1, WC-7, WC-11, and WC-10. And I was kind of doing the thing that Mike was doing, was looking at the 30,000 foot level, what was the intent in these different areas? So I was looking at the master plan and really diving into what was the intent. So if you jump to, in like it, I don't know what it starts, but WC 8, on page 98, the intent, the purpose of this sub-area is to allow for a mix of higher density residential uses with significant conserved green space. So far, I feel like that meets the intent. Development patterns will include a variety of residential buildings and lot sizes integrated with a pedestrian-friendly central corridor that includes publicly accessible conserved green space. Some retail and commercial uses will be allowed near the village center in WC1 and the neighborhood center. As I went through each one of these sections, they all had their own intent. And some of them, including WC10 and WC8, had some commercial aspect, some small retail. And so I wondered, I know we recently talked about this, but I could not recall anything like that. I also, they talk about in WC7 and 11, the 50-foot perimeter buffer, and lots that mimicked those that they were abutting. And so I think that's something I think we should look at. We have not had an opportunity for staff to really talk about this and which one of these three would be the most appropriate. So I'm not prepared to say, oh, I think this fits better than that. But I think what I'd like to do first is just to see what was the intent, how does this meet the intent? And like John was saying, okay, if this, what was the existing master plan allowed for X amount of residential, X amount of commercial, retail, whatever it was, I'd like to see that also in what is the proposed. So I think that there's some questions still here. Does it meet the intent? If it doesn't, would it need a full amendment? So I'd like more information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will, I'll come up to the board here. Board, do we have any input? Mr. Rugg?
Well, this is kind of like deja vu. Laura has got a very good handle on it. I think has done, presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
So, you know, there was a lot there. I know there was a lot of different interpretations while we were discussing this and everything. And I know we had a extensive one on WC 6 about, you know, being probably good for like a B&B type of facility. It's not in here, but it was part of the discussion. There was considerable discussion on it. So there's a lot. I think we have to take this a step at a time. And there's things in there, every time I read it, there's something different I find. So it's one of those things that it creeps up on you. So it takes even several readings. It's still not all there. And I mean, I've probably looked at this off and on over the course of the last 10 years, and it's different all the time. But I think that's some of the flexibility that's really designed into it, because not really knowing, but kind of looking ahead how things would be, and we knew they would be different. So, but I think we just got to, you know, really sit down and discuss. The whole basis of this, you know, with amendments is an agreement between the developer and the town. So that's the basis of the whole thing.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Couple
Yes,
of
sir.
comments. So number one, if the staff is happy with compliance alternatives, I'm happy with going down that path. I like this project. I want to see it go forward. So I don't want to create any roadblocks with that happening. So if they're happy, I'm happy. Can I ask a couple of just detailed questions? So
Sure.
When you were here before, you said everything was going to be rental units, build to rent, and now there's 50 build for sale as well?
No, I just was showing you so you understand what Procopio are doing. So there's part of that's going to be, that's not part of the 36 Pillsbury Road. So if you look at the dogleg that comes out where the cursor is right there,
Yep.
that's a separate project that they envision having 50 single-family homes for sale as a completely separate project, not tied to this one. So that's just another project that they have, and, you know, we're just putting it out there so you can see it, so you understand that that's coming. That's not part of the compliance alternative.
So
We
we're
don't
only
believe,
talking WC8, Laura, then, right?
not that area.
Okay.
It'd be 7 is.
I was
Seven,
gonna say, it
11.
looks like it would be in 7 and
Some
11
of
as
10,
well.
it looks like perhaps is.
Yep.
So
That's my question.
about.
Yeah,
Well-
Oh.
back to your point, John, is,
To my point, you know, we need to better define where is this, where
Yeah,
is this compliance
yeah.
alternative?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
and so I'm going to agree with John 100%. We just need to nail down the details, because that threw me off.
If I could respond, it's 36 Pillsbury Road, so if you pull up the GIS, it does not include that dogleg, so it's that 94 acres. That's the only project that we're looking for the compliance alternative, and that's WC 7, WC 8, WC 10, WC 11, and WC 1.
Yep, no, but the
Okay.
presentation speaks to the 50 for sale houses.
Right.
So-
No, and I mean, I think Procopio
So
wanted that in
I
there.
understand your point, but please
So-
understand mine.
Oh, I do, oh, absolutely.
Yep. And then my other question is, there's quite a bit of open space in WC8, which I think is fantastic. Is that going to be, how is that going to be preserved so that it won't be developed down the road?
Well, most of it's gonna be protected either by the wetlands or the wetland buffer that's associated with
So
it.
most of that is undevelopable at this point?
There's a portion in the top north corner that's like that. Sorry, you can see the little,
So
Yeah.
if you don't mind, go down to like slide 16.
yeah, there you go.
And I'm looking at the area where all the trees are at.
yeah, that
Yeah,
part in the
trees.
top left corner is, that's those
Yep.
darker gray trees are the wetland, and those will have a wetland buffer.
Yep, and then how about the area down where it really is fronted on Pillsbury Road?
Right, I think that's still in discussions of what, you know, trees could be salvaged that are out there now, or a different planting plan, but I think, right, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but the density that's out there now, we wouldn't be able to produce any more out front. The intent is to kind of, to place them the way they are, that's in that. layout there.
So as the discussion progresses down the road, I
Yeah.
think I'm gonna be concerned about how do we protect that if it's not part of the original plan, you know, so that it doesn't come up for discussion 5 years down the road. We wanna do something else there.
And I think there are provisions, correct me if I'm wrong, in there for deed restrictions, easements, and so protected, conserved land would be protected and conserved.
Commons, conserved commons.
Common
area.
space
Right,
would be
common-
protected and
right,
conserved through.
And there's also density
deeded right.
restrictions for that, so I don't know if the board has seen, but the overall PUD development has a tracking sheet, and, Kevin was familiar with it, so every time, so it says, all the allowed land uses, and it, and you track, so every time a project is developed, there's a tracking sheet saying, okay, now we did this for this area, we can't do anything more. So there's an overall tracking sheet that says, in this particular unit, as part of the tracking sheet, well, these sub-areas are limited to a certain number of units as well.
Okay. So just to kind of reiterate what I said, I like this project. I just would like to see it go forward with the minimum amount of red tape possible, so.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, please.
In regards to the trees, so there,
If you could just give us your name, I'm sorry.
sure, Will Nuccio with the
Thank you.
Procopio Companies. So there are buffers stated in the PUD, 3 rows of trees along Pillsbury and 1 row along Hovey. That will remain in place. It was talked about in the last meeting that a lot of those apple trees have been abandoned for about 20 or 30 years. So at this point, our best case and effort is to preserve those trees as is. We actually hired a arborist / orchardist that's actually going to go up there and take a look at these trees to see what the actual health is. We're going to do our best. That's why we show it like that. We're going to do our best to try to preserve the trees, but there are vines all over the trees now, so can't promise that at this point.
Yep, no issue with that. I'm more concerned about just making sure it doesn't get developed.
In the future.
Yeah.
Mr. Rugg.
Yeah. Also, I know in the master plan, it does talk about a row of apple trees along Pillsbury and also along Hovey. We know the trees that are there now are not gonna last, but it's like a in-kind replacement, like a flowering apple type of thing, so. The apple trees themselves require constant care.
Yep.
And you can see along, Gilchrist, they've preserved 3 rows. We had a little disagreement on the interpretation of 3 rows, so that's why it exists the way it is now. But it was more of a setback. But they planted new trees in the middle between the 2 rows of existing trees, so. There's usually constant care with an apple tree, but some of the, hybrid flowering ones have a lot, good longevity and also take care of themselves.
Giovanni, I think I saw your hand go up before.
Laura, I have a question. So they're going to be built for lease, right?
Build to rent,
To rent?
yes.
Yeah. And then, say 50 years in the future, somebody comes along and they say, hey, I got an idea. Why don't we sell them off as individual units? Could it?
No, because it's the underlying parcel is going to be owned by an entity, so you can't,
You'd have to
you have to
subdivide
subdivide it, right?
every
You
single
can't just
unit.
sell off that. No.
Just asking for clarification purposes. So if the owner wanted to sell this at some point in the future, you have to sell the entire project
one
as
block.
one investment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. D.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a lot to unpack here, more than even this presentation shows. I think you've done a great job. I do want to mimic Lynn's comments. I think this is a valuable-looking project for that PUD. However, there is a PUD, which is why you're here. I would say for sure, we need some type of a letter / documentation from the developer saying, yes, I'm okay with this concept, or however it's worded, but something from the developer. My other question is, in relationship to that, do we need town council to get involved in this? Because it's a huge change from what is going to,
So no, I don't believe that there is going to be a need for town council to be involved. I think that Well, I take that back. I don't think that this is going to be required, but if a full amendment were required, that is processed the same way that the adoption of the PUD in the zoning ordinance was processed.
Which would go to town council.
That would require the town council to be involved. But I think even if you took the most extreme interpretation of how to handle what's being requested, we're not talking about a full amendment in the nature of a zoning amendment. The only other possible area of town council involvement would be if there's a fiscal condition that's attached to this project. I am going to be talking later tonight or at a later time about how multifamily housing, we've known for a while that it is not, at least for the last 20 years, has not been burdensome on school-age population. There is a new New Hampshire housing the New Hampshire housing study that says that this type of project is actually net beneficial.
Right, and I did read that. It's a great resource.
Yes, 100 and something pages, but it really kind of debunks this myth about, the adverse impact of multifamily housing, at least on.
I just, to be clear, I don't want us to step in something that we shouldn't. And it seems to me like this is a pretty substantial change, and a lot of things have to be overlooked, for lack of a better term. So I don't want to beat it to death, but maybe get an interpretation from legal, or maybe have a chat with the TC about it or something, because it just seems like a lot. I have two more, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Of course.
Another question I have is the slide that's in color, the cartoon drawing.
This?
No, that
Cartoon.
one.
This one.
Yep, that one. In the yellow where it says WC7, what was the original intent or purpose for that little yellow sliver of land outside of the gray area that says WC8 on it? Does anybody know?
Can I respond?
Yeah.
It says the Tefn WC7, and it's a unique sliver. The purpose of this sub-area is to create a residential neighborhood that is compatible with the context of existing residential properties, and that's on page 95.
So do we know the dimensionality of that little yellow sliver?
It's 50 feet.
No.
You
Do you know?
It's
No,
50
that-
feet plus.
That's your buffer is 50
The
feet.
buffer is,
Buffer's
it's
50 feet.
deceiving
Why
because
that is?
But WC,
huge
that
parcel.
yellow
WC7?
piece with the
I
I
dotted
just
line
assumed
is
it
a
was just
buffer.
a transition from WC8.
No, but how
What
wide
is
it
it?
is what they're
Oh,
asking.
it's.
Is that 100
I thought it was
yards?
100, yeah.
where
Well,
you
plus
see
or
the
minus.
blue line around that, that's closer to the 50 feet.
No, I'm not talking about that
I know
line.
you're-
I'm talking about the black line on top of the WC7. And so that creates a dimension that's all yellow.
Yep.
What is it and why is it there? What does it do?
I asked Dave, he believes it's roughly the width of it, is what I think you're trying to ascertain, is 100 feet,
So you can see,
right?
you can see in the middle image there,
Yeah.
the buffer is the red dotted line, and then the actual WC7 goes to the inside edge of those single-family lots. So that whole outside sliver is WC7.
I think the intent originally, why there's a sliver next to in that buffer area is that it's a smaller density, so it transitions from the W8 into the abutting residential neighborhood.
If what I'm seeing is stuff inside of WC7, the original
bigger
intent
lots.
was a bigger lot
Yeah.
size,
Yep.
call this an acre compared to.
So it's more like a transitional lot from the smaller ones
Yeah.
Right.
to the
To what's
standard, to
existing,
the
right.
existing
It's
area.
usually, it's exactly, I think Jason got it figured out. That's what was the intent, is to have like housing abutting like housing, and then that is in Woodmont, but then, more higher density after that.
If you look on page 96, it looks about to be 250 feet wide.
Okay.
Okay, so,
So those could be marked, like 1 acre lots, like our traditional, zoning
Yeah.
for single-family houses.
so then the question is, when you're built out, how much of that WC7, that little yellow sliver that I saw on the other screen,
Is impacted.
is used or utilized? Are there houses in there? I mean, are there little rental units in that space?
There will be some. You can see it on Pod E on the
16.
top left of it.
Yeah.
It will definitely be less density in that area.
Mike, can you go to slide 16 real quick?
But I think the other thing too is that there is that 50-foot buffer between WC7 and the existing residences out there, Tony.
Okay, well, yeah,
The,
we're gonna stop this because I'm getting too far into the weeds and I don't think it's necessary for today.
well, it is a good point, though.
Yeah,
And
probably
you're looking at
look
cartoon,
at page
too.
96.
I am looking at a
You're
cartoon
looking at a
drawing, yeah.
cartoon.
Thank you for
The-
I love that phrase.
The other, so just another
Yeah,
description of
Page
what this.
96 has a good illustration.
Oh,
I have-
Mike?
97 says compatible use. This is an area that is restricted to residential uses of a similar scale and character to neighboring properties, including single-family and accessory residential units. So I think
That's
that sort of supports what Jason said. The only other thing I'll add right now is just to say that when we look at the master plan is pretty clear that drawings like this are, it calls them approximations or preliminary estimates subject to change. So we want to not use this too much as what's enforceable and what's required.
Okay. So then we have, we have a contiguous parcel of land that we know where the outer perimeter is. What happens inside there is what they're gonna show us next.
After they put the
Is
buffer.
that fair?
Yep.
Okay,
That's-
I'm good. I'm good with that then, because I don't wanna beat the horse. So, but and the final thing is I wanna go back to something that was said that I thought was true, but John, I'm gonna need some help on this one, I think, and probably Laura as well. The current PUD, when it was signed and accepted, froze the rules, regulations, laws, whatever, to that date. That, from that snapshot in time. Anything that's happened in the 20 years since, or however many years it's been, we can't hold this applicant to that newer standard. Is that a fair
To the
statement?
2024 stand, correct,
We cannot hold them to a 2024 standard.
correct.
So let's use wastewater because it's your favorite topic and mine as well.
Yep.
So if the state, and there is wetlands on this parcel, if the state says, I'm gonna make something up. This is not true for anything other than I'm making stuff up. You need a 20-inch pipe, and back then, and now they're saying, nope, because of things that have happened over the years, whatever you wanna call it, there's a lot more rain, whatever. Now, you need a 24-inch pipe. They're gonna put a 20-inch pipe in, not a 24.
No, so some of those things, Tony, goes back to engineering standards. So some of the changes that they might be referring to, might be, I don't know, building color or, again, back to the zoning. So I hear what you're saying, Tony, but again, there's certain things that are, no, we can't just sweep those regulations under the carpet.
Got it. Okay,
Okay.
I got it.
Could I?
Right, stormwater requirements aren't within the PUD.
Right,
requirement.
and I would just echo what John said, it's just the town's land use regulations, and I think the PU is specific saying
Okay.
your site plan, your subdivision, and your zoning are froze in 2012.
That's the part I missed in my notes. It's the land use regs.
That are,
That are frozen.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. That helps. Thank you.
Jason?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Number one, I really like this plan. I think that one of the things that we continually hear in town is that, open space, everyone likes to drive by apple trees and look at open space. And this is much better than the alternative, which is gonna look like a giant California development, right? So I like this. I do have a question. So WC 10 is one of the lots that that you're requesting, correct?
Correct.
So, but you're only developing to the edge of Hovey Road, correct?
Correct.
But if we change WC 10, that does give you the opportunity to use this new land use for across the segment that is across Hovey Road, correct?
I would say no. I would
No,
say
okay.
that it's limited to 36 Pillsbury and the confines of that, not anything else. And I know John was saying concern, like, well, what does this mean? Do we have to rename everything? My opinion, subject obviously to town staff, would be, no, you don't need to. It's a compliance alternative, just like if you have a variance, you know what I mean? You're not changing the zoning just for that particular piece of property. You're giving certain relief to that particular parcel. So the only parcel we're seeking relief from is the 36 Pillsbury. That does include the different sub-areas, but it's not going to extend until, across Hovey Road.
Okay, because I would just want to make sure that, we don't, not you or whoever it is that owns that other plot does not come back and say, well, you changed this for WC 10, and so now we want WC 9.
Nope, no,
we've got this piece, and so I just want to make sure it's contained inside this area.
No, and I think that's a great point. I mean, our request is for 36 Pillsbury Road for the compliance alternative.
Thank you, and all in all, I'm completely, I love this plan, so. Yes.
Anything else from the board? I think that, I think that you have a very good foundation of something to start with here. We've talked about something similar to this in the past. When I say we, I'm talking more Mike and I. I think there is a very unique design concept to this that would be going in a very unique space of town, part of town. Some of the concerns that I would have would focus more on in allowing something like this, making sure that, I guess would come to maybe sizes of houses and stuff like that. I wouldn't want to look at this to be some 3,500, 4,000 square foot houses, and I don't. Seems to me you don't want that either. This is the goal here is for a smaller. I don't want to say starter family home because it's not necessarily somebody starting into. Maybe people will age into these and they're looking for something smaller. But I think you have something very unique here that certainly will help serve a need if it's done correctly. Will help serve a need that is, appropriate housing for people. And outside of this, I would like to see what we could do as a town further to support similar development like this outside of what is just confined into what we're trying to do in the PUD here, which is a totally separate conversation. But I think you have something really interesting here. The only part of it that I don't love is that it's a, it's a rental base or a leased base project. It's a personal thing. I think there could be something really great in here if it was people had the ability to purchase them. But I think this is a great step in a direction that is housing that I think we need. So I think you've heard it a few times tonight. I'd certainly be supportive of this, so long as it's done the right way. I would certainly be supportive of this. Yes, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No?
So, I just pulled up the GIS as you requested. It's a lot clearer to me to look at 36 Pillsbury with those lot lines at 36 Pillsbury than it is on your slide, whatever it is with the cartoon drawings in color. Why don't you just do that? Why did you need to show all that? Was that just because you pulled it out of the PUD?
To show all
But-
the different sub-areas.
Yeah, why am I looking at that dotted blue line when your project is actually gonna be not that dotted blue line?
That was from the PUD. direct there.
Yeah.
No, I think he's asking why are we showing the
Showing
50%?
that, why don't you just show me,
Why didn't
why
we
don't
just
you
show
just show me
36
the lot lines
Pillsbury?
that are in the GIS that looks like that? which
What
is
he's saying is,
What you're gonna build on.
No, and I understand that question, and I contemplated that too, but Procopio Company wanted to be transparent with the board to say, look, we have these other projects in play, because I know sometimes developers come in front of the board and they don't say, oh, well, we're looking to develop this piece of property too. So they were putting it all out there for you to see that's what the
Understood.
overall intent is.
But
And
what we're doing right now.
now it's just 36.
that-
You are
that
correct.
photo right there, that lot line is the one you're gonna build inside of, and that's the one we're talking about today.
You are correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, they've been, from the outset, transparent about what they're trying to do.
yeah.
And I think they should be applauded for that.
Yeah, yeah, well, and I thank you for that, for saying, yeah, we got this other stuff we're gonna do.
But I
But
appreciate your
If
point.
you had
yeah.
added one more slide to say,
We just want this section.
but this is the one we're actually doing now, to me, it's much clearer.
Yeah, but if you're looking at PUD though, Tony, they talk, again, that's why they talk about WC7 is the conventional, blah, 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 blah.
Got it.
It's, so
I
that's where
understand.
they're gonna deviate.
That's why there's so much to unpack.
So I think what I've heard here, Mr. Chair, just to make sure that
Yes,
that
sir.
I have good direction, is let's get some kind of legal review on this, just to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sure that
exactly.
they agree with what
Yeah.
what we've discussed. WC7, I think we need to look at the
Clarity on it.
Yeah, clarity
Yeah.
on the character and scale and the
Yep.
consistency with the adjoining uses. Those are really my two big takeaways. Am I missing anything? And then, of course, John's list of engineering stuff.
I'm gonna say that we need clarity on all the different
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
subcategories, because
Yeah.
WC 11
Yeah.
is also a perimeter, has a perimeter buffer and a requirement to mimic what's abutting it. So each portion has its own special intent, and I think that needs to be clarified. That's where this is deviating.
Yeah, I think it's, yes. I think there are deviations. I do think that, I think that in the example about the potential for commercial uses, those are allowed. You know, they're not required.
Yeah.
But I agree that there is, we just need to make sure that this squares up with the intent in each of those
Yeah.
areas.
And if I could add one comment, and I agree, and I think that's part of the analysis when we come before you for the compliance alternative. So what we're really trying to get from the board is, what is that mechanism? So if you say it's a compliance alternative, then the intent, like Sylvia, great point, then that's our burden to say, this is the intent, that's how we're going through those 4 waiver requests, design criteria, to make sure that we're meeting that. But I think that's step 2, what we're trying to find out, and please have attorney review whatever you need to do, but I just don't want to confuse the two, so if we can come before you, and we're completely aware that we need to delve in a lot more to make sure that we're meeting those 4 criteria, but we don't know what mechanism you want us to go under.
See what you're saying.
That's just a distinction.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, which is that, the purpose of tonight is to take the board's temperature. I think that I think the board is receptive and staff is receptive to finding the most reasonable solution here that we can. And, but yes, that's exactly right, that they have to come back and make their case. And I think that,
I would say that, is it fair to say that it seems like at first glance, the compliance alternative would be the,
I feel that way because of how limited, and again, I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah.
How short that list is of things that you can't do with a compliance alternative.
yeah. So to give you some sort of a direction, I feel as though the compliance alternative, when I'm looking at this, it seems to be the most reasonable path forward. Would the board agree with that?
It'll be your easiest way to,
Yeah.
Yes.
I think,
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
fulfill the intent and everything. And Sylvia beat me to it, but each of those areas have, designed to have a certain character. And, I mean, that can be built in. You even look at like WC10, it provides for a village center. And that's where your, probably light commercial retail would be. service that area, because people are gonna want to get their coffee, they wanna be able to buy things quickly, and on the way home, or even like a sub shop or something, so there's that provision in there also. And WC 10, I think, is the, kind of the center, of the area.
I know it's separate to this conversation, but it is somewhat in unison, is that little dog leg there is where you would be looking to have 50 single-family homes.
Correct.
Seems like a lot in that little spot.
Can I clarify that?
Sure.
Kevin Smith, Pillsbury Realty. Sorry, John. I know. I'm making a mess.
Hey,
I'm making a mess.
Pull it right off the counter, would you?
Would you sit down, Kevin?
My understanding is that the 50 for sale single family would be spread out between the Dogleg as well as WC 6.
So the south side of Pillsbury.
Correct.
So
The
the north and the south of the corner of Pillsbury and Gilchrist.
Correct.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, because you look under WC 7, and it talks about the building on lots with a perimeter mostly set back 50 feet from the PUD boundary, and also the scale of lots of deployment of building is compatible and respectful of the adjacent context. And that is the people outside of it that have single-family housing.
What I was getting at is, as one person, not speaking for the board, but as one person speaking out loud or thinking out loud here, and I don't even know if this is something that could happen, but I would not be opposed to, again, I think there's a very, very unique development going on in here. And as I stated, I feel as though there's something missing from it, which is the ability to purchase a home. I don't think I would necessarily be opposed to seeing this spill into this other area that you're talking about is 50 homes between the two, that I would be comfortable with more density, having a similar layout, a smaller house, a theoretically more affordable home in the town of Londonderry. I personally would not be opposed to allowing a little bit more density on that, in knowing that, instead of $50 million houses in Londonderry, maybe it turns into $600,000 houses in Londonderry. And I understand the market drives all that and whatnot, but you get what I'm getting at of, allowing something like that with a smaller footprint serving a different purpose than 50 massive single-family homes in Londonderry. Mr. Rugg.
Trying to add on to that, Jake, and also.
That arm has got to be getting tired, because I'll tell you what, it's been in the air half the
You could be
night.
going, but it's starting to pop up now. But it does talk about, not specifically like 1 acre lots, but single family and accessory residential units.
Yeah.
So
So
there's flexibility there on,
I'm talking way down the road. I know you have plenty to do here, and that's a conversation for another day. But as one board member who I feel as though there is something that is missing in Londonderry, which is affordability of housing. And the only way to get affordable housing is smaller housing. And the only way for that to work is to allow a little bit more density, because it still costs the same amount of money to put a roadway in and bring everything you need to it.
Well, getting to that point, we always hear about open space, and one way to keep open space is you
Yeah.
pack that,
Bring
if
'em
every
together
house
a
is an
little bit.
acre lot, you can only put 4 houses on a 4
Correct.
acre, So
Correct.
if you reduce those sizes, you've now got more open space.
Correct. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, and to that point, obviously, we would not oppose having more density. The 300 homes is what's allowed within these various sub-areas. It's actually kind of funny, someone, after they saw the original presentation, asked the next day, how come they're leaving so much open space? And I said, well, it's because the way they're clustered, you're left with a lot of open space there.
Correct.
The only other thing I would draw the board's attention to is that we don't want to lose density either, in that, Art, to your point, there are sections of WC1 and WC10 that bleed into this area. It may be that Procopio decides not to utilize what's allowed in those sub-area zoning, but maybe they do someday. And so I would just say, as we're going through this process, that we wouldn't want to lose that density allowance in those sub-areas.
Thank you. Anything else from the board before we wrap this one up here?
Somebody tie Arthur's hand down.
I know, no kidding, huh?
Keep it down here.
Yeah, so
Move on to something else before I start thinking.
I think you've got a good idea of the temperature of the board here, which is I think what you came for tonight. I'm looking forward just to what you have coming down the pipeline.
And I appreciate the board indulging me in all of that information. I know it could be a little overwhelming, so thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. It was a great,
Thank
great
you.
presentation.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to some new plans and some conceptual stuff. Mike, how do you want to attack this, sir?
We are, so yes, new plans and conceptual. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to address the abutter ordinance first, if you'd like.
Sure, yeah.
So this is something that you and I had discussed, and Jeff as well. You know, this was some feedback that we got, you know, getting out into the community. Some residents who felt like, you know, maybe the opportunities for residents who are impacted by development in Londonderry to participate in the planning and zoning process is not as expansive as it might otherwise, as it could be. And as the vice chair pointed out, this is an area where there has been some movement in terms of a Supreme Court case that talked about the definition of a butter. And then the legislature actually reversing that Supreme Court case in favor of additional notices to folks in the area. There's also, interestingly, been a change in who can appeal from a decision. It's no longer somebody aggrieved, but it's an abutter. And so that clarifies kind of an odd discrepancy in the law that's existed, that people are invited to participate, but that's not necessarily the same people who might be aggrieved by a decision and would have standing to appeal. This is separate from all of that, but it's happening with that movement in the law that's taking place. And it simply expands our process for notifying people in the area who might be affected by a planning board, zoning board of adjustment, or in the case of a rezoning hearing, a town council decision. And so what we do is we retain the statutory definition, which, as I said, has undergone some change recently. And then we add on top of that folks who are within 400 feet of the property for which an application is pending. And that is, it couldn't be easier, and we're defining that by using the GIS tool, where you can punch in a distance from the property that we're talking about, and it will populate a list of the properties within that distance. And then the second change simply states that where the town of Londonderry is in a butter, in any given case, that we're also going to give notice to the town's abutters. And that's because I think some people feel that, you know, the town is not necessarily an effective stand-in for the interests of people who might be in the area in terms of, you know, protecting their interests, advocating for them. And we think it makes sense to allow people on the other side of the town's property to participate in the process. That's really as simple as it is. I'm happy to take any questions or address any concerns.
Anybody else? Mr. Ruck, go ahead.
Bueller?
Just one question, I'm looking for the logic. How do you arrive at 400 feet?
I pulled it out of the air.
Pick a number.
We could go up, we could go down. I mean, I think we typically advise people before the ZBA. I think 300 feet is listed in the applications.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, 300 feet is used for several things, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I know a discharge of a firearm also is 300 feet from a dwelling unit.
Right.
So
I mean, any number would be fine.
I'm just looking for how it was arrived at, if we have anything scientific or.
Nope.
Or just, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that I did some trials, if you will, punching in 400 feet, and it seemed like it got a rough kind of
At
rough.
least it cover those that
Correct.
would be affected.
Correct.
Before I add
I
my,
think it's not an, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I think it's not an error to inform more people
Yeah, I agree.
than less people.
I agree.
I think, just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cost is borne by the developer. Obviously, we don't want to load developers up, or property owners up with excess cost.
Yeah, you gotta look at reasonable.
You gotta look at
know?
reasonableness. But I think that we're not talking about a ton of money here.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be more in certain cases than it is now, but we think that we think that is unlikely to be challenged because there isn't enough at stake. We have talked with legal about this, and legal has advised us that there isn't a provision that allows or disallows a town from doing this, and there are towns that expand the definition of a butter. So I think it's fairly low stakes in terms of legal risk. But certainly, there's nothing that says that we can't do this.
Yeah, I'm
Hold
all
on
for it.
one sec. Jason.
So, the part where anybody who abuts town of Londonderry property becomes an abutter. I just want to clarify theoretically, if there is somebody before us or zoning board that abuts Musquash, anybody who abuts Musquash is now an abutter, or the rail trail?
Correct. So it would be 400 feet beyond. Yeah, so it's not that anybody who abuts town property in town gets notified. It would be if the
No,
town.
but if they abut that, so I'm
That-
just thinking
yes.
like a large property like
Yes.
Musquash, right?
Yes.
If somebody who abuts Musquash,
That's a
does
really- that's a
somebody
good
on
point.
the other end of Musquash now become an abutter? Or let's say the rail trail, where somebody abuts the northern end of the rail trail, does somebody down by Stumble Inn become
Not
an
town-owned
abutter?
property.
That's
though, is
not
it?
town owned.
Oh, okay, all right, then I'll just stick with the
State-
Musquash then.
state
Musquash
owns
is a
that.
really good example, though. I mean,
I'll
that's,
stick with
But
Musquash.
the town-
perfect.
the town has.
Great
a-
question.
that would,
Great
that
question.
would potentially be a problem. I think you're right.
I mean, because that's like theoretically 500 abutters.
Yeah.
Probably
And
more.
certainly, we don't want to do that.
No.
Yeah, I think also the other thing is, besides the town of Londonderry,
It's
is
3,000
governmental
acres.
entities.
Yeah.
Federal government, state government that has properties too.
Yeah.
so-
All government land except the Musquash.
I mean, we certainly could.
Seems the easiest way to do
But
it.
I mean, I think that's a really good
Include by excluding.
unintended consequence that we can certainly look at.
Yeah, I would think that you want to look at this a little bit closer, just because I can hear already an applicant come in and say, you're costing me $200 extra because of this regulation, or whatever it is, because we're not thinking of the, across the stream, plus there's the town land, plus all of that, and then you've just added so many abutters to this list.
And like the center of town, right? You got the schools, you've got the town forest, you've got like all of these contiguous areas that the town owns.
Well, the schools,
Do all of those abutters become?
the schools are owned by the district.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, as written, I think it would have that effect. I mean, I think that. I mean, let's be transparent about what the purpose of this is. It's one, we want to make sure that people have a meaningful opportunity to participate. Two, I think that a lot of what I've heard is there's a lack of confidence in the decisions of land use boards. I think there's a feeling that everything gets approved and nobody has the chance. Not enough people have the chance to participate. That and I think that little things like this, again, stripped of the unintended consequences, which I think is a great comment,
Well, I
help
think-
to increase confidence in the decisions of land use boards. And I think that that's something that we sorely need.
And so the
town.
impetus for this, if I remember correctly, help me out, there was a lady who came in that was not an abutter according to our current regulations, but was across a wetland or a stream or
Correct.
something. She came
Correct.
to a meeting and said, how come I didn't get a letter?
Correct.
I came by accident because I heard from a friend of a friend of a friend.
Right.
And we're trying to have that not happen.
Exactly right.
But
Exactly right. Now, I mean, I guess
if
the
you
other.
give a mouse a cookie,
The other side of it is, we do publish, by newspaper. We do post it, we do put it on the website. So there are various means, but, to that person's point, if you don't know that you need to be looking for it, you're not looking for it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a way to do it. I think you tried to do it the simplest way possible, and what we just found out was it wasn't. And so I think it needs to be, we need to relook at or whatever.
Well, I think if we, as I'm sitting here, is if we got rid of the abutter of or abutters of the town, and you have a reasonable geographic add-on to the statutory definition, you hopefully are bringing in some of those people.
Yeah.
And so perhaps we just revert to the 400 feet or 300 feet or whatever number you want.
Yeah,
So,
that's probably the easier way. The other thing, we had a problem with an apartment, and the association was the only one notified. That's how it follows the statute. And what happened is, the association didn't do anything.
Right.
We have a public hearing on it, and people have caught wind of it, and they, are renters, and they were not notified. They were very adamant about it, so.
Yeah.
What we did is send, we continued it and then sent notices to all of them. That was down here. Yeah,
On the Vista Ridge?
Vista Ridge.
yeah, Vista Ridge also. So that's a whole nother can of worms.
Jeff, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, this doesn't add on any additional kind of administrative burden to this town. I'm not, maybe minimally,
no.
but.
Not really. What happens is they submit an applicant list. They submit, an abutter list.
Yep.
There will be the additional step of having to direct them to the GIS website. Obviously, we do prepare the mailings,
Right.
but I think that we're not talking about hundreds of more address labels
Right,
and
it's just
mailings
like-
here.
yeah.
But I think Sylvia did have something to say. She may disagree.
Yeah, well, I think that it all depends, we're not thinking of every situation. And I just can envision the situation where you have someone, for example, I'm a Londonderry resident, I've lived here 50 years, I want to subdivide my property for my kids. Happens to be a slightly larger lot with all sorts of abutters. Now you're helping this person. Well, and now they're like, well, wait a minute, this is above and beyond plus this 400, but wait a minute, my sister, who's a lawyer, has said that it should be just what's in the RSAs, just the RSAs. And I can just hear it. It's,
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
yeah.
Zero.
That seems, yeah.
I just know that I've been in this conversation before about abutters, and it's always, let's just stick with the RSA definition.
I
It's
think-
just easier.
Thank you. I think that you have, there is not anything in our regulations that are all things to all people. And you can always find an exception to any rule, regulation, RSA, or whatever you want to talk about. And so, at some point, you have to say, you know what, this is the best we can do, and do it. Otherwise, you never do anything, because there's always something, someone, some whatever barrier to say there's this one thing that this may not work with. But that's all I have to say.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I think it captures at least 80 to 90% of the use cases here. We're always gonna have that 10%. The one item that we still send these certified mails, so there's still, and I haven't sent a letter in like,
It's
I'm not sure how long.
It's almost $9.
Okay. And.
We could adopt a first-class mailing for these additional abutters. But the problem is, I could just hear it. I didn't get it.
Right. And that's that's another point. Obviously we promote in the newspapers, we post on the website, but the mailing is an active outreach. It's, those are the newspapers and the website, those are more passive. Like you said, Mike, you have to kind of go and search for that. So, I mean, I fully support this. If we have to probably nix the town of Butter until we get a little bit more clarification, I'm okay with it. But I think expanding it's gonna be more helpful than harmful.
Yeah. Yep. So maybe we got a little bit more to do before we,
Yeah, so, do you want to see it again?
No, I think just take out the town-owned part of it and just run it.
Yeah, so I mean, the process is, it's planned to be in front of the town council at their next meeting. It's a zoning amendment, so it requires a recommendation from the planning board. It seems like the consensus is to strike the
I guess-
abutter.
yeah. How much judgment can you use when sending out abutter notices?
I think you try to use none.
You go with the
Yeah.
RSA, what's required.
Um,
Yeah, you can,
I guess, can you pull up the GPS real quick, Mike? I'm just trying to work with like stuff that is town-owned and,
Right.
and how it works. Go to like, Holstein Avenue, so on the south end of town there. So, throw on the conservation overlay. So you've got that long strip of green parcel right there.
Yep.
Just to your just above that. Well, either one of those. Click on the lot that's right below that, so it highlights it in blue.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, next one down.
This one,
No. The big open one.
right here.
So this is the example I'm looking for of like whatever that lot is. It's got two sides of that lot is in a butter that is owned by the town of Londonderry.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I see is, you go just north of that onto Lantern Lane. To me, those people should be getting an abutter notice to this development. Even though the town of Londonderry owns what's between them, I don't know. To me, it just seems like it would be reasonably prudent to send abutter notices to the people hugging that on Lantern Lane. But then again, this goes into 6 million abutter notices.
Well, 6 million abutter notices, and I think you really don't want a lot of discretion in your abutter notifications, because
then it's
perceived as
becomes you're
Yeah.
picking and choosing.
it gets to the point, what does the public notification do,
right.
Just because people don't read it.
So is it
It's
appropriate?
responsibility to keep up with it.
Is it I wonder how.
I think you'll get a lot of pushback if you add town-owned land, a lot of pushback from a developer. They're gonna say, oh, you've just added, I don't know, X amount of money and time.
So just for good.
There's a reasonable buffer. there,
Yeah,
the way
just
I look
just
at
for
it.
good measure, Mike, from the edge of that to the first house on Lantern Lane, you're looking at 445 feet, right? So we said, what did we say? Abutters plus 400 feet. Do we just say?
Where's Lantern? Is this Lantern right here?
Yeah. So, well, just go straight across, go, if you went just like that, it's, 400 something feet.
Yeah.
Can we just say 500? I mean, 400 feet's a lot of area. Could we round up one more and say anything within 500 feet as opposed to 400? And I think we've done I think we've done a reasonable service to making sure that we're reaching out to our abutters.
On my street, it's only 4 houses, because the lots are 150 feet.
Correct. So what'd you just do, Mike? You just gave us a 500-foot.
Yep, from the highlighted lot there.
Yeah. So do we do 500 feet? To me, that doesn't seem hugely unreasonable.
Then look at the other piece though, too. Right, we're only looking at Lantern and,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Up above.
Where
Well, I guess click on that one big piece of land that I was just talking about there. See what the difference looks like between what we allow now, which you said is 300 feet, and what it is at 500 feet.
Picking like a,
Sorry, I lost it. Yeah, right in here. You know, where's it 500 here?
yeah,
It's, you know, that's gonna be pretty significant from there.
right here.
That still brought you back to that.
That's like half of this one in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, what
Well,
would, what would be
that does raise a question in that, so we absolutely want as many people, we want people to know. But by the same token, if if I'm seeking a zoning variance to put a shed on my property, and there's a person 500 feet away, like, is it fair as the person putting the shed on, that somebody 500 feet away can?
How about if we put it in the newspaper so people can see it?
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's a really good point, which is, I mean, maybe one way to limit it is
I
to
mean,
say.
it's one or the other, you
Yeah.
know, like, we still have to keep in mind the person who's.
It's in the paper, it's on the
Trying
town
to get the stuff done.
website.
I mean, how about this? No expanded definition of a butter unless it's a site plan application or a subdivision of a certain size.
Yeah,
Because-
so it takes off all the,
Correct.
I want a
Right.
shed on my,
Right.
yeah. I think that's fair.
That could work.
I think that's fair.
That could be then in the site and subregs. But this is now getting really picky. And then you have two different definitions, or maybe you'll get to three definitions. I highly recommend not doing this and sticking with the RSA.
I agree with Sylvia.
Yeah, I mean, it gets to the point where, you know, where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line?
That's what we're trying to figure out, yeah.
Yeah, and you can spend
Think
several
if you-
evenings.
If you were to do take any one of the different communities within the region to see what they have for an abutter, they're following the RSA.
And then I think if we do, you know, like around it, as you're suggesting, and then a developer could protest saying, hey, the state statute only says this, who gives you the authority to, you know,
That's fair.
so, you know, I think sticking with the statute is legally the safest way to get your butt covered.
So to me, I feel like the biggest thing I've gotten out of this is, you know, we need to, if it's such a concern, then people need to look at changing the state statute, not necessarily the town statute.
Yeah,
The
but-
town statute will continue to mimic the
Yeah,
state
besides what we're
statute.
looking here, there is a new statute now, it's House Bill 1359, and it's diagonal is
Correct.
included also, besides directly abutting.
Correct.
Well,
That's
and-
gonna be added on top of this, once this gets passed.
And if there's a stream or a road, it does include crossing the stream and that as if it wasn't there.
So again, what a great exercise we've just had.
Yeah.
Exercise is never bad.
Well, I mean,
And
we've
It's an
so-
important
put work
discussion.
on this
Yeah.
to show that we're trying to do the right thing.
That's my point.
You know?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's exactly my point.
Absolutely.
There was a concern, we talked about it, we
Right.
hashed it around.
It's not just,
We tried some
oh, no,
scenarios.
that's not a good idea, like, we're not gonna do that.
Exactly.
We
Like,
tried a
you
few
know, we're trying
scenarios,
here.
they
Yeah.
didn't work,
Yep.
we're right back to the RSA.
Great
There's
exercise.
nothing wrong with that.
Yep. Yep.
So the consensus then is a recommendation not to adopt.
Correct. And
Yes.
stick with whatever the current state RSAs would be for this,
Great.
you know?
I will so inform the town council.
And it was not a short discussion
Thank you.
either, we exercised it pretty
No.
good. So,
Yeah.
You want a motion on that?
Why not, just to be safe?
Okay.
Mr. Rugg.
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion that the planning board is not in agreement with the verbiage of ordinance 2024-S-. And recommend the town council not to adopt.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Just a point of discussion, do we want to
Yes,
say what we do recommend? Recommend that we stay with the RSA?
That we recommend that we recommend staying with the state, applicable state RSA.
You want to include that in the motion, Lynn?
Yes.
Okay, I'll include that in it.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Lynn, and roll call vote.
Giovanni Barani, yay.
Tony D. Francesco, yay.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Art Rog, aye.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason ICA.
Jake Butler, aye. So,
Pass 7-0-0.
to the council we go.
To the council we go.
Fantastic. Mike, are we going into, do you want to do the short-term rental ordinance? I think maybe we can hold the, I'll leave it to you, but I think maybe we can hold the work session for a earlier night.
That'd be totally fine with me. Thank you.
Could we get through, do you
Only
feel like you want?
9:15.
Come on now. Do you,
This will take an hour, though. Yeah, this will take an hour.
do you want to discuss short-term rental, or is that gonna be 11 o'clock before we know it?
Well, after the butters discussion, I think.
Yeah, there's certainly, that's not an urgent matter, so happy to
Yeah.
bounce that one.
Yeah.
I do have just two updates or comments. One is I wanted to applaud your work and Jeff's work before the town council. I thought that the presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
It was a nice reminder to me, because I had sort of forgotten that, yeah, we've got this master plan capital reserve money that the voters did support, and with the expectation that it was going to be used. And so I think it's great that you pointed that out and that we're starting to use that for its purpose. And then the last thing I wanted to note was that I know that there was a discussion, I don't think I was here, but there was a discussion about there's the heritage memo
Yep.
that I sent you.
Yep.
That could be a very lengthy discussion, so I
Yeah.
defer to you, Mr. Chair. But I will just note that there was a discussion that I'm aware of about access to the Emmett database of historical resources. I'm happy to say that we have secured access to that database, and Alicia Cheerson Hildenen and Mike B. Are the registered users. So this is something that I think, as we're looking at changes to what we're asking the Heritage Commission to do, we can ramp up our efforts to monitor historically significant properties in town.
Okay. I think that's fair. On the, what's the board's flavor on, the heritage discussion, I think, is going to be a lengthy discussion. We don't have short meetings. Does the board have any flavor of, do we pick a night that's an only agenda item, or do we decide that one of the two meetings that we do have a month, we're only gonna have that as an agenda item, because I feel as though there's gonna be some lengthy discussion there. And in a night like tonight, where we've digested a ton of information, I don't know that we're as productive as we could be to then start to discuss what in and of itself is a huge conversation.
I think some of us are at our best at 11 p.m.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
I said some of us. I was very clear on that. I was very clear.
If it gets around 11, then things kind of get a little woozy,
I don't know that that's actually true, though, that that's gonna be a super long.
Completely.
No,
It could be short and sweet and cut and dry.
I think I agree with Tony, because I think Mike made a very good presentation to us about it. And to me, it's getting back to like it was 20 years ago.
I think it could be actually a
Times
very
change.
short discussion,
All right.
possibly.
Well, I think maybe, a suggestion would be, unless anybody is in strong disagreement with what I wrote, a next step would
Yeah.
probably be some kind of interaction with the Heritage Commission.
Yeah.
So I'm
I
happy
think,
to.
I mean, everybody here has obviously had the chance to read and digest what he's put forward. Is it something we could just, let's set up a meeting with, do we really need to do, I mean.
Yes, I
we had
think
the meeting.
Yeah, I know, what I'm saying is, do we really need to discuss it more as a board? I'd be comfortable saying, hey, let's put a meeting together with the Heritage Commission based off of the work that Mike has put in, that he's provided us, that we've all had the opportunity to digest now.
Yeah, because we get that, you can send it to the Heritage Commission also, so they've got some time to.
I'm not sure the reception will be quite as warm, but I do think it's
name of the
probably
game.
time to share it with the Heritage Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we could have the discussion and then not in a state of shock or anything.
Yes.
So I think
it's
maybe
pretty
that's.
it's pretty
Yeah,
straightforward.
maybe that's our next steps on it, is it's not another discussion topic here with just this board, is we set up a time that involves the discussion with the Heritage Commission
I
as
think
well.
the discussions we've had, I think Mike has incorporated everything anyway. I can't think of anything else, but you just put it together so well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Much
Everybody's okay
appreciated.
with
Well,
that?
it's, again, it's a
Yeah.
amalgamation of what we've all discussed, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so short-term rental, doesn't the town council have a reading on that at their next meeting? Two?
Yeah, yes, but we can certainly bounce it off to a later meeting. It's been noticed. If the council continues it, we don't need to renotice it, so.
Let's talk. You want to talk about it real quick? Yeah.
I have a couple of comments.
Yeah.
I can either email them to Mike or. just
No,
we
no,
can
no.
talk
I
about
mean,
here,
we could
so.
talk about
And
it.
it is just as a reminder, it's a non-binding
Non-binding, yeah.
review and comment, so less formal than the other one.
Yeah. I say let's hammer away real quick
And to
and.
be clear, the public comment on this item
Is that-
will be at the town council meeting that has been noticed
Correct,
already.
yes.
And so that's why there's no one here to comment, but there's no comment on it tonight because the public comment for this item will be at the town council's next
And
meeting.
I think it was the same with the previous one that we passed.
Correct, but certainly, I mean, if somebody showed up here tonight, I'm sure, Mr. Chair, you would have entertained what they had to say.
Yep.
I think that, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes difficult to sync up the board schedule with the town council schedule, and then when you add the 7 days notice on top of that, things
That's
move
crazy.
very slowly.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing my best to keep, provide all the required notice, but keep these things moving so they don't just sit there pending for months on end.
A month and a half
Yeah.
before it's even
Right.
thought about again. Absolutely.
So are we talking about this
Yeah.
now?
Let's have some brief.
So why is
brief
it,
discussion
why
on it.
are these effective 180 days, 6 months?
That was responsive to a comment that I got, I think, from a town councilor, that there's some education, there's some public education and awareness that needs to take place here.
Okay.
Again, it could be a shorter period, it could be a longer period. It could be that it's effective immediately.
No, I'm not thinking immediately, but I'm 180 days started to be short until, like Jake, I used my calculator and figured out it was 6 months. And it seemed like a longer time when I said 6 months than when I said 180 days.
Yeah, we can certainly shorten it, no question.
I mean, it's very interesting what the state legislature does to, on, past bills when they take effects. Some are like a week, some are, a month
Exactly.
or two, and.
Yeah.
Well, some are
I don't know
past
what they want.
dated, some of them as of August 1st that they just passed the other day. So
Yep.
they go backwards
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't want to do that, but I'm thinking like maybe 4 months is enough, not 6 months. I don't know how many days that is,
Yeah.
but it's
3,
it's
6,
like
9,
less than
120.
I was kidding.
Yeah.
I can certainly convey that sentiment to the town council. They
Yeah,
should look at a shorter
I would,
period.
so I had the absolute pleasure of having a short-term rental house next to my previous house in Londonderry. It was a disaster. And I will say it was not so much because there was a big difference. It was not, when a lot of people think of short-term rentals, you think of, you can rent an Airbnb and you can go rent a house for a week. This was a 5-bedroom house that had 5 bedrooms rented out 7 days a week. It was a disaster. Like, it was a nightly rental by bedroom per house.
It
There
sounds
would
very
be
similar to the.
5 cars and
Yeah.
yeah.
Basically a boarding house.
That's a commercial operation.
you got-
That's a hotel.
You got a hotel
To me,
business.
but like that falls inside of like, you want to rent your house for a week or something to one family, go ahead. But there was 5 different people in this house 7 nights a week.
And I think that,
Consistently.
it's difficult to argue that we shouldn't have a registration requirement at a minimum and that we shouldn't have a phone number. Because I'm not sure if people realize this, but the gentleman who owns the house that we've been talking about, that was really the genesis of all this, came and testified at the town council meeting and said, we need a short-term rental ordinance. So
And he said, I would be willing to sign whatever you want me to
Yeah,
sign.
exactly.
And just show me the forms to fill out, but we need to do this.
Right.
So I was kind of fun, actually.
Yeah,
that
you
he
need to
did that.
keep track of them, and you need to find who is accountable
Right.
for the
Right.
property.
And I just
think-
think it puts them on notice that we need to know who to call, and you're responsible for, by and large, what's taking place there.
When someone bought their single-family home, they did not buy it with the expectation that there was gonna be a rental house next door. They didn't. And I'm not talking about a 12-month rental, because, and I've been in the same situation Jake is, but it wasn't my primary residence that it was a problem. But at any rate, my point is, the 12-month rental person is a different mindset than the 4-day rental person. I know that from personal experience. The 12-month person needs a place to live for 12 months or longer, and they don't want to get kicked out. The person who comes to Londonderry for 3 or 4 days, I'm going to step in it because I usually do, doesn't give a crap about Londonderry, doesn't care about the Londonderry rules, doesn't care about the neighbors, doesn't care about anything. And I made a broad generalization there that I shouldn't make, but I did it anyway. And therein lies the problem. And so all you're saying, all this thing does is, it says permit, but it really is a registration, is really more what it is than anything else. So that the town knows, so that the police department knows, so that the fire department knows that there is this thing going on where the owner is not there that weekend when 22 Harvard undergraduates come up for the weekend to pick apples. and something happens at 2 in the morning, and the police get there, and they look in the registration or whatever they do, and they say, okay, here's a car. Okay, yeah, Mr. Salidas, you got to come to your house right now, and you got to get these people out of here.
Yeah.
You know, they're shooting off fireworks.
That's
The
the
neighbor's
story that
awning
we're-
is caught
Yeah.
on fire. And, you know, and I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
Jake thought he had bad ones. I'll double it easily.
The other thing I'll say is that we've received legal advice on this. It's perfectly legal.
Yeah. So the only argument that the town council had, is, if I recall correctly, was they could not agree on the fee to have the.
Correct. It's been left open for discussion,
Yeah.
really, at this point, so.
For the
Yeah.
public hearing.
If you don't get a permit and you get caught with having a party, what is the penalty?
The penalty would be, it would be under the code enforcement statute, and that is a violation level offense punishable by up to $1,000 a day for each day the violation continues. Obviously.
To the
that's-
owner of the property.
Correct.
I do think there's, and this must be, that I maybe should have a conversation when this comes to the council, but I feel as though there's something missing here, that short-term rentals should include, there has to be some sort of, I have no problem with short-term rentals if it's the whole house. I guess short-term rentals need to be, like, can we make a limit? I'm telling you right now, if living next to a 5-bedroom house with 5 different people in it 7 nights a week was terrible.
So there have been 2 Supreme Court cases that have discussed municipalities' efforts to deal with short-term rentals. I don't have them at hand, but I know that this is an area we need to be very careful to make sure we get good legal advice, because there are communities that have really pushed the boundaries of what you can regulate.
Yep.
So you can, municipalities by zoning can regulate health, safety, general welfare, and that starts to bump up against people's property rights, and it's just figuring out where that tension point is. And short of it, yes, the town can regulate it by zoning ordinance.
The Conway the city of Conway's lawsuit, the city lost, and I read the entire brief, because I have no life, was because the town of Conway did not have proper language in their regulations.
Right, I think there was a
That was
lack
the
of a
genesis.
definition, yeah.
Correct. That was a genesis of that loss.
Right.
So if we had a short-term rental definition that included a single tenant renting a,
I don't know.
yeah, then you could say, hey, you can't.
Like a whole house or something.
Yes.
I'm not a lawyer, but I watch Judge Judy every day.
We could certainly look at that
If
as
we
a, as
could
a,
look
as a
into that a
next
little
step.
bit,
Yeah.
because that is, you
Yeah.
know, as somebody who is actually, literally half the reason they moved was to get away from
Yeah,
this thing.
renting less than the whole house.
It's just
yeah.
crazy. And again, that to me is that's a commercial operation, that's a hotel, and if you wanna if you want your house to be a hotel, then it should be
Permitted.
as safe as a hotel and
Right.
have means of egress and
Right.
sprinklers and this and that, so you can rent it out to 19 people.
No, but you'd have to meet the requirements of the zone of that piece of land, though.
Correct, which there is not, a hotel is not allowed in AR1, but there is an operating hotel in AR1. But it's not.
I'm thinking this doesn't anywhere affect a bread and breakfast or anything like that.
No,
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 there's a
because that's
difference
that's an
there.
operate, that's,
That's a business.
That's-
commercial
yeah,
enterprise,
yeah.
definitely.
B&Bs in Londonderry are registered,
yeah, correct,
because they had to go to zoning to get it.
correct.
Yeah, and I think
We
there's-
know where those are.
But, and back to
Statutes
health
that
and
define
safety,
it.
they also have things that they need to follow in order to be
Right.
compliant to
Correct.
an Airbnb, you know?
Correct.
One of those is egress.
So I had two comments.
I forgot about you. Afternoon.
So two comments. One is, can we deny a permit? And under what conditions can we deny a permit?
Not as drafted. We would have to expand this.
It's really an application.
Yeah,
It's not a permit.
it's really,
But can we,
It's a registration.
yeah.
but we should be able to deny it if there's cause. And then my other comment gets down to owner responsibility, and I read all the time about bad behavior, people going into neighbors' gardens to get produce. They need a tomato for the grill, so they just run next door and steal the tomato. For firewood, they cut down a tree for firewood.
Well, that's how you get shot in New Hampshire.
So,
So that's the next ordinance, who can you shoot? But owner responsibility right now talks to noise, I think it needs to be expanded.
You make a
Or I would
zucchini
like to,
gun.
I would
Yeah.
like to know if we could expand it to
Yeah.
include vandalism or
I
just
mean-
any type of collateral damage.
I think that the ability, I don't think that you can, it would be, I mean, this is actually, this isn't even a land use ordinance, but if it were a land use ordinance, you can only make the owner responsible for like conditions that are associated with the land, I believe. And when we're talking about something that's criminal, I think it's gonna be difficult to tie it back to this. But I could take a look at that.
The noise aspect, I think, is a good one, but also, can it be revoked if they then are not compliant with the, whatever you wanna call it, the permit?
That's a good,
I've neglected Jeff for about 10 minutes now.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
Not a problem.
So, Tony, just to kind of like, I'm shocked about these nightmare Airbnbs stories
Yeah.
because I actually work really hard to keep my rating up.
If they were
Including,
Airbnbs,
you know, kind of cleaning.
if it was, it's controllable if it's an Airbnb.
Right.
That's the difference.
Right. But I just wanted, just say that, I work hard to keep my rating up. Including,
He's a super host.
yes. But I think to the point of, and if I missed it, my apologies, but if, Jake's scenario here, 5 people in a room, if we're gonna have an application, can we, basically, spell it out that the intent is to rent your whole house or nothing? I don't know, there's legalities there, but I think that would be.
The college towns do it.
Rent
Right.
to your whole house or nothing, or rent to one tenant.
UNH, Keene,
Well, it's a
Plymouth,
single
they all
family
have rules.
residential, so maybe you could tie it back into that.
Yeah.
We can look at that. The process is different because then that would be a land use ordinance. It would require, like what we just did
100%,
for the abutters.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but I think it's certainly worth a conversation. Mr. Knights?
So might as well tie it back into the last conversation, right? So if somebody is coming with an application to rent out their house, do we need to contact the abutters? Because I know if my neighbor is about to start renting out his house every week, I'd probably want to know. But if it's just a permit with $100 application fee and just give me your phone number, then it doesn't sound like there's much of a requirement to let the neighbors know about
And
it.
to that point, is it actually a change of use or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're making money off of it.
And would the list be public?
So, yeah, I mean, it would be if there was a 91A request, if somebody came in and said, let me see the file for all yes, that would be public. I think as constituted, we would not want to notify abutters, but if we could look at that if we took additional steps to actually regulate this.
And I think maybe that's what I'm talking about, is more of a regulatory component to this.
Or put it in the application, have they notified their abutting neighbors?
Because the Jake scenario, that's a boarding house.
That's what I mean, that's not
That's
a,
not,
Right.
I'm gonna rent out occasionally, in the summer.
Right.
One bedroom. Yeah. So
That
I
gets
think-
very, very fact-specific quickly.
yeah.
I think that, we're talking about boarding homes, that's a commercial thing, and that should be regulated right now. Whereas this is very different, so I think defining it, is,
Yeah,
I think
there needs to be clarity on the
Registration form.
definition.
Yeah.
They need to be specific of
Well,
what they're gonna do.
and maybe we put on there that, I think that we don't need to regulate the commercial use because it's just not allowed right now, right? If you take the position that
They're not allowed.
it's a boarding house
It's a
or it's a
hotel.
hotel,
Yeah,
it's just not allowed. But we could perhaps include some language in the application that alerts people to that fact.
yeah.
That might be helpful.
And to be clear, for the 4 people that are watching on TV, this does not include long-term rentals. This is all trying to take care of a problem with a 3 or 4 day rental situation for a person and a house, or 12 people and a house, in Jake's case. And so that's the genesis of this thing, in order to protect, let's use the word, abutting neighbors. See what I did there? I
Absolutely.
tied it right back in.
Clever.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so.
Jake, I got one more
For
question.
the tranquility of the neighborhood.
Does this include rooms over garages?
That's an ADU.
That's an idea.
I think it depends on, so, I mean, if it's an in-law apartment, no, because that's just being used as an accessory as an ancillary use to the primary use.
Plus, that's a long-term rental.
Well,
And,
let's say you build an in-law apartment and the in-law dies. Now you got a room.
Yeah, but you can do that.
It's an accessory dwelling.
It's an
unit.
accessory
That's
dwelling,
allowed.
yeah.
All right, I wanted to clarify. that.
Unless you start renting it out and every 3-4 days, it's a different person.
Right.
That's
What I'm talking
again,
about.
right,
Hotel,
Sure.
that's a hotel.
right.
Your rooming house.
And what we've, let's go back to the definition. So this applies to short-term rentals defined as follows: the rental of a dwelling unit for periods of up to 30 consecutive days to transient occupants, lodgers, or guests, and where the use does not constitute a hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, or other similar use. So, you could have an ADU that is being used as a short-term rental,
you could.
and this would then apply.
Can I just ask a question, Mike? What if it's a tenant at will situation?
30 days.
A tenant at will situation such as,
They don't have a lease for,
You have to give them 30 days notice.
They're month to month, is
30
what
days.
you're.
let me think that through. So, I mean, I think that situation where somebody has been, typically you start with a lease.
Yep.
And then if the lease expires, you become a tenant at will. But it's a continuation of, it's still a leasehold. It's a continuation of the original lease until it ends. And I think under those circumstances, it's not a short-term rental. It's just an expired lease that is a tenant at will
Yeah, we're
situation.
just talking about unintended consequences, you know, if somebody intends to live there, but they never did a formal lease and it's technically a tenant at will. you
So
know.
if you said up to 29 days, that takes care of that problem.
Well, you're thinking about notice period. if
You're
were
thinking,
gonna
right,
evict,
about
you know.
evictions.
Yeah,
And I think it's slightly different.
yeah, it is.
But I think that reasonableness this needs to be administered in a reasonable fashion, the same way, you know, that any other regulation is implemented. And I hope that we wouldn't be
Knocking
Unintended
down the
jamming people
door.
up who are,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. I think that's fair. Board, anything else?
No, I had a
Fantastic.
great conversation
Another
about
good,
that.
yeah, another good discussion.
Fantastic. I think, Mike, I'd like to hold the work session for a future date.
Absolutely.
All right with that.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. Maybe we can do, as we get closer to next month, we can see which one looks like it's gonna be slower.
And would
go
you
from
like
there.
me to arrange a meeting with the Heritage Commission?
I would.
A joint meeting?
I would.
Okay.
Yes. The
Fantastic.
board, everybody's good with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
You're gonna have to wear armor.
No, they're not like that.
I think they're receptive. I mean, they care about historic preservation, and I think that returning to that core function, I think monitoring and preserving, I don't think that's going to be the issue.
No, and I think Dr. Ellis nailed it.
He had a
Yes.
phenomenal
He did.
write-up.
He just nailed it.
His was actually better than yours, Mike.
I will give him all the credit. That's why I attached it.
It was
David has a very
succinct,
good way of
very
expressing
honest.
himself. That's a,
Yeah.
And there's no, it'd be hard to find a person more heritage than him.
Exactly. That's exactly
I
right.
mean, he's,
I think
so,
David should be the town historian. We
Yeah,
haven't
he's-
had one
he's
in
great.
a while, so.
yeah,
Yeah.
for
Is that our
sure.
official rule?
It is now. All right. With that, folks,
Motion to adjourn?
I had a motion. Second. Roll call.
Monty Moretti, I agree,
Tony
yay.
D. Francesco, yay.
Win Wiles, aye.
Aye, Arthur Rugg.
Aye, Jeff Pinto.
Jason Nightside.
I, Jake Butler. Have a good night, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who's been listening.